Welcome, welcome, welcome to Two Brothers and an Idea. I am. They call me Ferdinand, the bringer of balance, leader of many disciplines, and one of your hosts of Two Brothers and an Idea. Listen, I got a dynamic brother over here, dynamic speaker, great orator, Ra Thriver.
What's going on, my brother? See, we doing a new format today, huh?
We're playing around with something different.
Yeah, man. I got a request. Next time we gotta bring back the pre-show, man. Bring back the pre-show.
This is the pre-show, right? This way we can go ahead, we can have our talk about whatever we want to talk about, and everybody get those jewels because you be going in, man, before we even go live.
Oh yeah, man. Listen, it's at the point now. It's been like this for the past several years. It's not even a brag or boast, but every conversation I feel like damn near should could be recorded because there's stuff that's being dropped that could definitely reach the people. But good to see you, my brother. Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you as well.
Yes, sir.
I thought you had one dark on me for a little bit.
Hey man, just a skosh, just a skosh. You know what I mean? Definitely unplugged for a little bit, not even consciously, somehow the days start rolling into each other. Next thing I know, I'm like, yo, it's Monday again. You know what I mean? But
Right.
that's the beautiful part of this journey. Yes, at times, when you see people on here pontificating, it looks all cool, but if you're really into the journey, you know what I mean, it's really ugly at times, and it really does get quote unquote dark. And someone's not telling you that, then maybe they're not going part of the full journey, but for me, a lot of times to get to allegedly wisdom, it takes a lot of tossing and turning against the rocks, and sometimes even not knowing anything. It feels like to know something.
I can understand that. I can completely understand that. Yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes I have those
Hey man, you
rather.
gotta pick the bass up on your voice. Don't be talking to me all smooth. What I tell you about that?
I really do appreciate these conversations with you, real talk, man, because it kind of puts me in a position to go back to material that sometimes I don't touch as much these days. So, like when I started the journey of uplifting humanity, I use primarily three teaching materials. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill,
Mhm.
Psycho-Cybernetics by
Mhm.
Maxwell Maltz, and The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy, right?
Mm.
Those three books, and I would throw in there The Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Mm.
So, I come back to those when I'm talking to you, which that's a good feeling because the information within, if anyone out there who's read these books, powerful, powerful material in these books, right? So, the reason why I'm even bringing it up is because I pulled out a few books for
Uh-oh.
this episode.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad that you did, because I was obviously in the trenches doing shadow work. Wild episode is about shadow work, you know what I mean? So but it's cool because I know my man came with the practicality. I'm gonna be pulling from the abstractness, and yeah, man, I know that this was a an episode, because once again, we were talking about last episode, we were talking about polarization and sort of manifestation if you really break it down. But I know that most of the times it isn't, we know what we want, but we have all this regressness energy or shadow energy or dark or adverse energy, which is typically making a lot of noise, not allowing us to get to that state where our thoughts can be pure, which is just me polarized on one thing. So, I felt like, in the middle of my week, man, I was like, man, we really should touch on this, and this would be a great episode for Ferdinand, that to get his off, because this is an area that I know that you helped a lot of people in and you talked about a lot. So I just felt like it was a great episode to touch on after we gave them the jewels on how to go in the positive. Now let's give them a little bit of the hard hat with the light on, to shine into those dark areas, man.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that, brother, for you to kind of bring us full circle and help everyone understand, like, we're on a journey with these episodes. So in episode 27 focused on shadow work on Two Brothers and an Idea with I Am and Raw.
Mm-hmm.
What we're going to be touching today is first our contract, our social contract that our brother Ra has brought to the table for us. And in that social contract, we're going to make sure that we understand the words that we're using. So we're talking about shadow work today, right? So let's go ahead and dive right in. We'll put up on the screen our first definitions, and we'll start with the etymological dictionary.
Yeah, man. Shadow is definitely an interesting word. When it comes to, you know, the definition and other words that is you know, derived from, you know, when you start talking about shade, you know, even girls, they like to put, you know, I guess shadows on their eyes. They call it like a concealer, something that conceals something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. So we are on page 543 for shadow. I'll make this a little bit bigger for everyone out there.
Mm-hmm.
A little too big. All right. So we've got. Let me. I got a lot of books in here right now, so it's moving a little slow, a little funky. All right. I think that'll work. Yeah. All right. So shade, shadow, obscurity, partial darkness. These are but two forms of one word.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, man. And you know, another thing that it kind of reminds me of when we're talking about shadow, shade, you know, obscurity, partial darkness, when we put on shades, you know, you're trying to block something. It's not just, you know, a negative aspect. You know, shades can also be used, you know, in good ways to, you know, block out things or to you know, make a space for something. So the fact that shade and shadow, these things are coincide with each other definitely means a lot. Shelter. I see shelter is even on there. You know, shadow, shade, shelter.
So let's take a look at work. All right, let's pull that. Let's make this a little smaller. Then we're gonna go to work. All right. So
No pun intended.
you already know.
And when I also just think of work, you know, this is just. I think you said what you called it, connotational. What you called it in the chat.
Connotative reading.
Connotative reading. There we go.
All right. So work, a labor, effort, thing done or written.
Mm.
And
And
then
I also
let's.
think of when I also think of work, I think of walk as well.
Yeah. All right. So this is the other part of the definition up here on the top right.
Wrought,
Profit,
wrought.
acquisition, habit, warzad. He studies or labors. Agriculture, an ox for plowing.
Mm.
This is all work, y'all. All right. Lots of definitions. But understand this is an etymological dictionary of 1882. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and move on over to Black's Law Dictionary, second edition. And what we've got over here, we're going to go to Google right after we touch these dictionaries. 1, 2, 3. All right. So we've got work over here. Let's see, work and labor. The name of one of the common counts in actions of a sumpsit, being for work and labor done and materials furnished by the plaintiff for the defendant.
Mm.
So let's go ahead and hop off the books for a second and let's hop on over to Google. Let's see what Google's got to say.
And once again, you know, this is just us laying down the foundation, you know, of what these words are, you know, because a lot of time we use words and we don't necessarily know, you know, what they mean. So just to give us a good understanding of shadow work, what we mean by shadow work, which as we see, you know, work, he's showing you plow, oxen, you know, it's related to these things. So it's also agriculture. So you're also talking about farming. So you're talking about growth. You're talking about weed pulling. You're talking about roots. Shout out to roots tribes and everything else in between.
Or appreciate
So
that.
so shadow, a dark area or shape produced shape by body coming between rays of light and the surface, and that's very kind of dope, because they say that we live in a shadow world, or it's casting off light from an original body, sort of like how the moon is shining onto the earth. And then I also like looking at the similar words, so silhouette, outline, shape, contour, profile. What does it say? Numbra. Umbra. I never heard of those two words. Numbra and umbra. Penumbra.
Which line are you on?
I'm on similar for the top one. For the top definition, where it
Oh,
learns
yeah. Yeah, penumbra.
penumbra. Okay, I'm over there breaking out Spanish.
All right, let's see what else we got down here. If we got any, we got verbs. All right, here we go.
Screen or shield from an attack, which some people take their darkness and use it or hide it, trying to cover up allegedly from attacks.
Right. So when we think of shadow work, everybody, let's think about it from a perspective of our dark side, with the work that we've got to do in that space, the carnal space, right? That those desires that have gotten out of control, shadow, right? And then the work that we do is we go within, right? So instead of giving a bunch of what Ferdinand thinks, let's go to the Holy Koran real quick. And then we're going to go to the
Mm,
Bible. Then we're going to go to Think and Grow Rich. Then we're going to go to the Power of Your Subconscious Mind. Then we're going to go to the PTSD, stress disorders, and related diseases and combat vets. And what we're going to
mm,
see is a well-rounded view of how to understand our,
mm,
our, our shadow, then also how to understand how to go about approaching it, how to go about getting results, right? We're going to get
mm.
all of that tonight. As long as my brother Roz is ready to go, we're about to lock in.
I'm ready, man. I'm ready.
All
I
right,
didn't
so
have my
let's go
coffee today.
ahead. You ain't got the coffee. So let's start with the Holy Koran. I'm going to pull that up for everybody real quick. So I'm pulling from, and matter of fact, let's do this. Let's show everybody the cover real quick. Show the cover of each book. All right, so we're going to start with the Holy Koran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, in chapter divinely prepared by the noble prophet Drew Ali, chapter 15. And this chapter is very significant when we talk about, and we see mirrored the story mirrored in the Bible. So this story is very important for dealing with the shadow. I'm gonna just read a little bit. Divine ministry of Jesus. Jesus goes to the wilderness for self-examination, where he remains 40 days. Is subjected to 3 temptations. He overcomes. Returns to the camps of John and begins teaching. The harbinger had paved the way. The Logos had been introduced to men as love made manifest. And he must now begin his divine ministry. And he went forth into the wilderness to be alone with Allah, that he might look into his inner heart and noted strength and worthiness. And with himself he talked. He said, my lower self is strong. By many ties I am bound down to carnal life. Have I the strength to overcome and give my life a willing sacrifice for men? When I shall stand before the face of men, and they demand a proof of my messiahship, what will I say? And then the tempter came and said, if you be the son of Allah, command these stones to turn to bread. And Jesus said, who is it that demands a test? Is it no sign that one is a son of Allah because he does a miracle? The devils can do mighty things. Did not the Gentile magicians do great things before the Pharaoh? My words and deeds in all the walks of life shall be the proof of my messiahship. And then the tempter said, if you will go into Jerusalem and from the temple pinnacle cast down yourself to earth, the people will believe you are the Messiah sent from Allah. This you can surely do, for did not David say, he gives his angels charge concerning you, and with their hands will they uphold lest you shall fall. And Jesus said, I will not tempt the Lord, my God, Allah. And then the tempter said, look forth upon the world, behold its honors and its fame, behold its pleasures and its wealth. If you will give your life to these, they shall be yours. But Jesus said, away from me, all tempting thoughts. My
Mm.
heart is fixed. I spurn this carnal self with all its vain ambition and its pride. For 40 days did Jesus wrestle with his carnal self. His higher self prevailed. He then was hungry, but his friends had found him, and they ministered to him. Then Jesus left the wilderness, and in the consciousness of holy breath, he came into the camps of John and taught. And I've read the complete chapter of chapter 15. Now, I want to bring up the significance of dealing with the shadow and how we can have help. It shows us some help here. Like a lot of our friends might be like, "Oh man, you're going through it. All right, listen, I got you on a shot tonight. We're going to the club, right? So you go to the club, you have a shot. Now you're drunk, and you meet some beautiful thing that's at the club, and she helps ruin your life more, right?
Right.
Well, where's your homeboys who's like, yo, man, I see that you fasting. I see that you kind of hungry. You tempted. Nah, man.
Right.
Listen, read this book. Go sit on over there by the flowers. Go
Right.
sit in the water.
Facts. Facts.
We need that when we're dealing with the shadow work.
Mm. Absolutely, man. I think we talked about that. I don't know if we talked about that on the phone or offline, but we talked about, after Jesus got baptized by John the Baptist, they said that he left to go do battle with his passions or his temptations, and he went for 40 days and 40 nights, because, he got baptized from above. And here's the thing where, part of my message is where when we think that we have to perfect ourselves from God, which most of the time God is going to meet you where you are. You know what I mean? And then he's going to give you that awareness, that knowingness. So then now you're doing battle with your carnal, but you're not doing it with yourself. You're doing it with a higher version of yourself that is allowing you to, we're doing it with a higher version of ourselves that is allowing us to balance out that lower, able to, be able to decipher, as Ferdinand was saying, when your friends show up, what friends are showing up in good faith, or which friends are showing up as tricks of the devil. One of the other things that I tell people always say, well, what did you do to attract that? Now, if you're doing any level of work, and you're doing anything that actually so-called raises your vibration, you're going to attract all type of things, especially under God's son. You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily what you attract. You're never going to attract one polarity of anything. This place doesn't work like that. It's about what you accept. So just like Jesus, he got baptized, right? And then the next thing that showed up was the devil. Someone uninitiated, like, what did I do to attract this? Because we don't want to go through no test. And we think that a lot of times the spirituality saves you for the test, when the spirituality is just wrapping you up in a better a body to go to the test. There's no way to subvert not doing battle with the Satan, your lower nature, your carnal desires, and but God is trying to get us to see something here, is that when we're reaching for the carnal, it's like sand. We scoop it up and slip through our fingers, but somehow when we reach for the higher being or the higher consciousness, the lower gets added to. You know what I mean? So, when Jesus went to go do, battle with his temptations before he went to the people, because, shout out to the Holy Quran, because I've never read that version of it. I've always read it from the Christian biblical version of it, but it was true, before he was able to perform his greatest miracles, he did do something, but after he got baptized, he had to prove himself even more. He had to purify and lessen that noise even more. That's why as soon as he got baptized, he didn't go to the people. He went to the desert to do battle with his own carnal and his own nature. And you even seen him, even say, how can I build myself up? Because I have to be a Messiah to people. I have to, so he's going through his own doubts, his own, inhibitions, and in him toiling with this. And you see, most of the time, and obviously you said that Jesus was led to the spirit by the desert to be tempted. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And a smart man once told me, if there's a devil in this world, he goes by the name of doubt. You know what I mean? So doubt can also be part of the shadow self. You know what I mean? But doubt can also be part of, as Ferdinand's gonna get into if we keep going on, this regress, different traumas that you have in this body that can be conflicting with the higher self. The higher self is saying, believe, walk, walk in my light. The lower self is saying, who am I to do? Da, 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 da. So it was very the fact that you brought that scripture. I'm definitely glad that you brought it out and showing us a different version to the Quran, because there is. I know a lot of us want to be stuff for other people, but until you can really go and do work with that unconscious self, that shadow self, and go through that, you really can't be a true help. So this is why it's beautiful, because the only way to truly help others is through helping yourself.
I really appreciate that, brother.
Yes, sir.
Everyone out there, I want y'all to understand that the shadow is necessary. The shadow just has to be tamed,
Mm,
right? The shadow could be likened to the carnal self, right?
mm,
There's lots of ways to look at the shadow, but the shadow is going to be tempted. And what our job is to be in balance so that we make sure that the carnal's getting what it needs, but it's never supposed to overpower the vessel. It's never
there you
supposed
go.
to overpower the being, right? So we just got a chance to get a look see at that in the Holy Koran. We're about to get a look see at that in the Holy Bible. And we're going to take a look at a few other things, right? We're going to take a look at Think and Grow Rich. We're going to take a look at The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And we're going to take a look at this PTSD stress disorder book, right?
Mm.
This is episode 27 on shadow work, Ferdinand and Ra. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so let's put this back up on the screen. All right, so we got chapter 4 of the book of Matthews right here. And I'll go ahead and read. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. And when he fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterwards he was hungry. And the tempter coming said to him, If thou be the Son of God, command these stones be made bread. Who answered and said, It is written, Not in bread alone doth man live, but in every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him up into the holy city and set him upon the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, that he hath given his angels charge over thee, and in their hands shall they bear thee up, lest perhaps thou dash thy foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, It is written again, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. Again, the devil took him up into a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and said to him, All these will I give thee, if falling down thou wilt adore me. Then Jesus saith to him, Begone, Satan, for it is written, The Lord thy God shalt thou adore, and him only shalt thou serve. And I'll stop there in the first 10, 11 verses. It's very significant that we see that these temptations are mental. He's in the wilderness, and these temptations are happening in mind. Well, could be likened to worms,
Mm,
parasites.
mm,
Might sound really crazy to some people out there, but if you understand how worms and parasites work, this is the type of messages that when they're playing the piano of your vessel, when they're pulling on those chords like it's a violin, and they're influencing the mind, well, the mind can go in all kinds of different places when those worms and parasites want something. And that's the beauty of going out to the wilderness and going out to the forest and purifying. We become so alkaline or so balanced that they can't live in the vessel anymore. And now we have full control.
mm.
The spirit has full control of the vessel. This is how we tame the shadow. And there's other ways as well. We're going to go through those. I see my brother Rock got something. Go ahead. You
Yeah,
cooking up?
man, you sparked me with that reading that part, man. And then when you said that, this is a battle of the mind, because it is. We're watching a conversation between, to me, the so-called lower self, the shadow self, which the shadow self also represents the physical world. What we see is a shadow of the higher world. So this is when, the outside world is trying to tempt him and is telling him, "You're hungry, eat." And Christ is trying to tell him, the type of fasting that I'm doing, food can't satisfy, and I can't live off bread alone. I have to live off, the word of God, the power of the tongue. He's trying to write his thoughts in his own mind, and he's being tempted with adverse thoughts. And he understands that even if he's lowers himself to eating of the so-called food to feed his body, but he understands it's not his body that's starving. It's his mind that's starving. And he's, really conveying to himself and to me, his power. And we even talked about the angels, talked about how, you have command of all of these things. But he understands that there's a level of internalness that he's trying to internalize. And to me, it's like, you know that you're fasting. You see, maybe, your boy with a plate of food or whatever the thing is, and is trying to tempt the man. It's all right, eat, but he doesn't know the mission that you're on. He doesn't know the God that you serve. He's too illusioned by the physical world, the kingdom, the things that he sees, and he thinks if he just seeks and if I can just grab these things, I will win. Versus the wise man is understanding, to me, what I see is not the real thing. So even though I see it, I have to eat and I have to be of a different light, of a different source, because the other source is the truly my bread. It's truly the thing that sustains me. It's not the physical world. So that was the perfect way that you put it. And to me, that is how I read it. I read it as the higher self and the lower self. And which one is Jesus going to be tempted to? Because he's going to go back and be these people messiahs. He's going to go back and be these people leaders. He has to be able to walk by a faith that can't be seen. He has to be able to walk by, because plenty of people are going to point out to him, look, Lazarus is dead. Look, the damsel is dead. Look, pointing these things out in the lower realm. And he has to combat law versus law, lower law with higher law. And he has to just understand the things that I see, even though I see them, they are not the truth, which is original substance. So to me, absolutely, for you to say that is how I read it as well, is higher and lower self battling for supremacy in those scriptures.
So peep this, right? Imagine getting to be Michael Jordan of something, right? Anything. Michael Jordan of mathematics, right? Michael Jordan of whatever, right? Imagine you get to be Michael Jordan of something. Of the most important thing that there is. Imagine the temptation when you walk into these cities and you've already fed many of the people in these cities in some which way, shape, or form, right? So they already know of you. Imagine the beautiful women. Imagine how gorgeous that they are, and they just want to touch the hem of your garment. You know what I'm saying? Think
See where
about
you're
the
going.
temptation there.
Right.
Imagine going into these beautiful cities, right? And the greatest chefs of their time are making whatever kind of meal. And they're looking at you every time you walk in like, listen, your money's not even good here. Whatever you want. The most expensive thing on the menu, listen, every time you show up, it's already yours. And we're going to do it special just for you. Imagine the temptation.
It's a lot of temptation.
Imagine that temptation that's even talked about in the Bible and the Holy Koran, where he takes him up to the top of the mountaintop, where he takes him up in the sky, and he's like, listen, look at all these kingdoms. I'm about to give them all to you. You want to be that dude? You want to be in control of all of this? That kind of temptation, man, that is challenging. This is the shadow within that is trying to take control, right? But we're always blessed with a choice.
Man, beautiful analogy, brother. Thank you for that, alley for you even saying it that way. And how you're explaining it, it is perfect, because in our way, we are our own celebrities, right? And when you start doing the internal work, Michael Jordan, thank for that analogy. He did the internal work, right? When no one was paying attention, Jesus going into the desert, right? Now when his skill level, his frequency, his vibration starts to get to a certain level, starts to happen. You start to have proof. I start getting excited. Almost start stuttering out this month. You start getting proof, positive confirmation in your external world, right? And your external world is trying to take you away from your true God. It's trying to take you away from original source, and it wants you to believe that you are the maker of self, and it wants to take all your time so you don't get to go back to your desert. Michael Jordan, you're in town. Let's take you to this premiere. Let's take you this food. Girls say, what is he not doing? He's not in the desert. Where's his desert? It's in the gym. It's in his meditative. It's in his books. It's in all his things that, brother, you alley-ooped it. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the chef. I'm just in there putting together the recipes. You know what I mean? And this is what we're watching. You know, that's the devil tempting him, because that's what happens with all of us. After you get to a certain level, you start to engage with your reality a certain way, and then your reality starts to open up, and then you forget the source, the bread, the thing that truly fed you. And I go through this as well. So where even myself, things start going so well. Guess what? Now I'm not meditating as much. Now I'm not hopping on, you know, the esoteric calls of Ferdinand as much. Now I'm too busy in the world doing the things. My watches, as I just said, start to go through my fingers like sand. You know what I mean? And it's like so it's not even, I will say, a built-in safety mechanism, but what you start to understand on this journey when you're arising in your own messiahship is, as you start to arise, the world starts to open up, and then now you're constantly seduced to, do I worship the work of my hands, or do I worship the source that gave it to me? You know what I mean? And we're juxtaposed in between these two things. So that analogy that you gave was the perfect example, because that is how, once again, but here's the caveat: we have to participate in a level of carnality. Correct. You know what I mean? When the people were hungry, Jesus didn't tell them to go pray to God. No, he gave them fish. You know what I mean? But he was only able to do that because his belief in his true source was able to override certain things in the lower nature. And if we understand things that we read in the Kabbalion, we understand that the invisible, the mental mind is the mind that is funny, because, you know, I posted this as my last post before I kind of went dark. Is the present. We call it the present, but just present. You know what I mean? So why is it a present? Because it was already made for you before it was sent to you. That's why it's called the present. That's why it's called, as Ferdinand said, exposing your gifts. It's something that is there by a higher source that is telling you. You just seek the inner world, which is ironically in the dark. That's like the paradox of this. You know what I mean? Is that we want to see things in the light, but the thing that's going to give it to us is in the dark. You know what I mean? So it's like a weird inversion flip, that to get to the light, it ain't no way to really get to the light, but to go and to master and then to integrate the darkness. Divine paradox. Absolutely. So thank you for that analogy, brother. That was perfect. And just to bring it back home, you know, what Ferdinand was liking it to, because for Jesus to reach the level of messiahship where he received the Holy Spirit, you know, that is a reward for the inner work that when he went amongst all the people that he was doing, right? And then him going to do battle with his own temptations, or Satan, is him going to LA, is him going to, you know, New York, when all these places, and now he's trying to see, like a Kobe Bryant, am I going to wake up at 5 a.m. still and hit the gym? Or I was out all night with homegirl and the top people from the town, you know, which in the midst of it, it seems like fun, but it's low key stealing and siphoning the spirit, to where there's a fine balance that one must have. And if I do say there's a balance, lean more towards the true essence, the true substance that actually gave you the thing in carnality.
You know, when we think about shadow work, shout out to everybody who's listening. Appreciate you being here. It's episode 27, Two Brothers in the Idea, Ferdinand and Rob. We getting it in.
Yes,
and we're touching on shadow work, right? So when we talk about that, I think we need to have an understanding of how that shadow kind of is moving, what it does when it's triggered, right? So one of the things that I pulled up for everybody is the 8 trauma reactions. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put it up on the screen and just do a light touch on it, so we can see how the shadow might sometimes get out of control as a result of us not doing the proper shadow work ahead of time. And then we see what the reactions are. And these are things that, you know, just for everybody out there, they can take a look at to see if you having these types of reactions. Now you can reverse engineer, and you can make changes because you can see what's going on with you, and you might be able to use these with others, right? But that's completely up to you, right? So we got matter of fact, let me go ahead and just read this, right? We got the 8 types of trauma reactions and how it affects life. This is a phase that many trauma survivors and mental health professionals have come to recognize as a powerful truth. When someone experiences a distressing or shocking event, the aftermath often goes beyond the simple recollection. In our last blog, we discussed how trauma often leaves lasting marks on a person's mind, body, and soul. These can manifest in various ways, known as trauma reactions, which can significantly affect a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, distorting how they navigate life over time. So, type of trauma reactions, we got the trauma repetition, we got the regular trauma reaction, trauma bonds, trauma shame, trauma pleasure, trauma blocking, trauma splitting,
Mm.
trauma abstinence. I think that one of the most significant of the trauma responses is the trauma abstinence. We see a lot of resistance and running in different types of
Mm.
ways from the triggers that are pulled by others, or even if we might accidentally pull our own triggers. It's a lot of the times these triggers get hit on accident. Nobody even knows that they did it. And what do we do with those who do that? A lot of us will literally just say, you know what, I'm not messing with that person no more. I'm not that person not available for my phone anymore. They're not available on my Facebook anymore, right?
Mm.
Well, this is not the best way to handle it because eventually that trigger is going to get pulled again by somebody else. Well,
Mm.
eventually you done got rid of everybody in your life. Now you having trouble getting a letter of recommendation because you plan on moving. Just go ahead. It's on you, my brother.
No, no, I got a question for you, man. That trauma abstinence part is definitely triggering. For me, just saying, the trauma of having these thoughts and then having them like a self sabotage. So,
Yeah.
question for you, dang, what I had a great question for you. Just I wanted you to go in more on it. Oh, the question for you is: do you see in the line that you work in people's trauma response and how they confront things connected? Because to me, I think like even what you said, you talked about things that happen. So I think that part of trauma also has to do with confrontation, whether it's your own internal dialogues that you need to confront, or is it the scene that you confront? So do you see with people that you work with that they also have trouble with confronting things or making strong boundaries in their life?
I'm so glad you asked this question, right? Because yes, I do see many of the people that I help with root tribes in the holistic health journey. They have trouble with facing the trauma or just facing their own behavior, right? At the
Mm.
same time, part of the reason why one of the books that I have pulled up is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind and Psycho-Cybernetics is because it's going to help. Those books are going to help us to address the self-image.
Mm.
The
Mm.
self-image is one of the main reasons why you have those types of situations where people are running away from trauma or they're having trauma abstinence, right?
Mm.
This is as a result of what a person believes about themselves or what they know about themselves, right? So if you know that you are a courageous person, you know that you're an overcomer, right? Well, you more than likely are never going to have trauma abstinence as a response to trauma. You're more than likely going to be a person who leans in to the trauma to figure
Mm.
out what's going on and listen. I don't like feeling this anxiety. I don't like feeling this. Whatever it is I'm feeling, I don't like that. I'm dealing with this right now. Right. This is based on what they know about themselves. Now, if
Mm.
a person is having some of these trauma reactions and it's consistent, more than likely the view of self is poor.
Mm. And that's beautiful because I'm a fan of Neville, and I've been I know we're gearing up soon for that. But I've been so restudying because it's funny how you have your favorites, like you said, and you might go away and stray. But he always talks about how when it comes to manifesting, that our entire reality is responding to our self image, and it really is the self conception of self that is confirming everything. How much money we feel like we should make, what type of relationships we feel like we deserve. And he says this is why they say God sees everything in secret, because we think that the world is not seeing the parts of ourselves that we're compartmentalizing, putting into a shade, concealing. But we don't understand that the actual reality is either confirming or denying our conception of self. And shout out to that book. I know you didn't get into it yet, but the fact that whole people faces can get rearranged, plastic surgery, where one person was once ugly, they were now beautiful, but that did not solve the internal resolution or conflict with inside of themselves. So no matter how much changing of an external environment, which I've been victim of this too, and I had to start understanding, like, certain things that I wish to manifest, and low key, because the way manifestation works, a lot of the times, sometimes it does happen. Oh my God, this happened, but it happens so subtly that you end up getting the thing that you wish for. But since it happens so natural, you didn't know. Your reality is now changed. You're in that house, or you're in that relationship, but yet the feelings are still not there. You're still promising yourself, you're still bartering your todays against your tomorrows, and say, yeah, but once I go here, or once I do this, which I also feel like, it is a trauma response as well.
It manifests in so many different ways. One of the things that I really appreciated from Dr. Sebi during his life, and he dealt with a lot of shadow work type of work to help people to heal from different diseases. But he let us know that all of it manifests from the same exact cause, right? So I would like to liken that to the mental space, even to the spiritual space. One cause, many different types of effects. And the reason why many different types of effects is because of how noise has its own way of processing the energy, or the energy is moving through it, and maybe there's a whole lot of noise. So let's look at noise like you and I, we got a spaceship, right? And we out in space riding, and our spaceship ain't built with the greatest materials, right? But so we getting smacked by stuff that's going really, really fast, right? It's little small, little pebbles, right? But they moving like 800 miles an hour, and they just scratching up the hole. They putting little small little dents in our 4-inch thick glass and all this, right? Well, this is what the information coming in sometimes is doing, pending how much noise that a person has. So by the time they finally got a chance to really ingest whatever was, brought to them in knowledge, it may be a shell of itself.
Yeah,
This
and I have another question. I have another question for you, man, when dealing with people, because I feel like, once again, man, the shadow work is so amazing, because there's a lot of things that come into confronting your shadows, or digging, the skeletons, so-called, out of your closet. But when it comes to real healing from this, and identifying, certain triggers, it comes a level of self reflectiveness, because I think a lot of times when we go through triggers, we're so busy pointing at triggers, we don't understand how we are. Because once again, I remember telling like my sister, and I asked her, like, do you notice that every time you have a problem, you're there? You always have all these problems, but somehow you're always there. And it's all these people that got these things, but you're always there. So basically, what I want to ask is, what have you seen in people who maybe weren't able to self-reflect, and what were you able to do to get them to have that self-reflection? And then we understand trauma, because I know that you probably dealt with people who dealt with sensitive things like grief, right, and certain things to where they absolutely might be justified in pointing the finger, but they don't understand by how them not maybe changing or looking at it differently, that they're giving power over to the thing. So typically, I'm asking that, how do you help people have the self-realization that they have to confront the shadow and then integrate the shadow without just disassociating and keep putting it off, in that trauma off on maybe the situation or a person who caused the trauma?
In a perfect world, I prefer to take my clients out to Root Tribe's Whole Health compound and help
Mm,
them to approach these challenges in an oxygen-rich forest environment
mm,
that is devoid of suggestions that are fugazi.
mm. And remembrance, and certain things that make you remember certain things too.
Well, that's the beauty of the fire, right? So
Mm,
whenever we're out in the forest, might get a little cold at night, so we got the fire. We're probably gonna sit around the fire and talk for a while because we're
mm,
not. There's no electronics that we're bringing on these holistic health missions.
mm,
Um, we got some books we might read, maybe, but it's gonna be kind of dark. It's gonna be kind of hard to read. We're not bringing a lot of electronics, so the fire kind of helps us to see
mm,
the quiet during the daytime. Maybe I'm taking a nap or something and they're just kind of walking around. Well, you're not listening to Jay-Z and Tupac right now, so you're listening to the sounds of nature. You're going to face you in that
mm,
space. Now in a situation where it's not necessarily perfect and they won't agree to go to the forest, I'll walk them down the path wherever they're going to be at. So, for example, let's say it's a person who's in Arkansas and they're like, hey, man, tell me what to do. I mean, I'm not able to go to the forest, but what I can do is what I can do in the house, right?
right.
So I tell them to turn off all of the media, turn off the TV, only use the phone for what is absolutely necessary. If it's not absolutely necessary, don't even touch it,
Mm,
right? Set all electronics. What you eat needs to be, or excuse me, really it should be a fast. But if they're eating, it needs to be vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, uh, fruit, right? And it needs to be in its whole form, right? If possible, not coming out of a bag or a box, unless like it's a bag of oranges, or a bag of potatoes, you know. But and then I let them know like we're focused on the 6 keys of life here. So we already started with nutrition. What we already kind of started, and the nutrition includes the media stuff,
mm,
cutting that out of the diet. Also cutting out of the diet uh, refined sugars, enriched wheat, added salts, added sugars, bioengineered food ingredients. All of this stuff has got to come out of the diet, right? But then the sleep has got to increase. There's got to be more sunlight brought in. See,
mm,
in a space where you surround a being and you have that being in just the golden ratio. Well,
mm,
vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, as long as they're real and they're not made up, then they're going to embody the golden ratio. Being outside in the sun, golden ratio. Being outside in nature, golden ratio. Exercise,
mm,
going to get the blood moving the way it's supposed to in that proper vortex, golden ratio within. The more, excuse me, the more of the golden ratio, what happens is you start to see that individual become stronger. And when they finally are ready to face whatever's going on within, and it's not going to take long in that space because there's no other suggestions around except nature and real
mm,
reality, they're going to eventually win that battle.
mm,
That's going to produce a certain type of dopamine hit that they more than likely hadn't had since they were a child. And they're going
mm,
to again, just like a crack
mm,
addict.
mm, mm. Nah, man, that's powerful because also it seems like you're taking people and helping people if they can't take themselves out of the environment, but to produce an environment so when they're going over certain triggers, they're not in the same even chemical state. Because once again, we know that, and even when I think of bad foods, I think of information. When I think of information, I think of that. What happens if you get hit and you hit a trauma? It's a form of inflammation as well. So I look at these things as all interconnected. And some of us are so inflamed by words, things that we've been through, and even the foods that we eat, that these things are causing trauma responses. And as you said earlier, you have to bring parasites into it because you understand when you get into a deeper level with the body. And even when you're talking about our gut microbiome, I could not remember that word at all the other day. I was trying to tell
Microbiome.
someone, yeah, microbiome. I could not think of the word at all. I just said it just there. But when we talk about the gut microbiome, and how I guess 90% of the serotonin or something is created in the gut, and your serotonin is the chemical that allows you to even feel satisfied or feel happy or feel okay, or in the present with what you have. And just to think, if you're eating the wrong foods, that means no amount of meditation, no amount of so-called affirmations, no amount of even trauma responses is going to be able to circumvent if your gut is completely thrown off. So it's going to give you you're not going to be able to be satiated, not in your food, not in your life, not in your relationships, because you're just not firing correctly. So, Ferdinand is talking about, it really is a holistic approach when you're talking about confronting your shadows, when you're talking about confronting your trauma. And as I listen to you, it really isn't no one or two things, because here's the thing too, people. I think that we think that when we get to a certain spiritual point that we're going to stop being triggered, or things are going to stop triggering, and that doesn't happen. What usually happens is that once you reach a certain point, there's a gap. And Ferdinand, maybe you can attest to this too. Trigger, and there's a gap of response that you tend to develop. You know what I mean? And in that gap, this is where you could remember certain things you heard on the podcast, certain things that Ferdinand might have told you in consultation. It's like you're able to see things happen, analyze, observe what's happening, and then still choose to not be tempted by the tempter, still choose to not let the external thing to conquer you, because maybe you went on one of Ferdinand retreats, or maybe you've been doing the meditations and you reconfigured your chemical state when it comes to these certain things. And I tell you this, people, and even for myself, I think we think that we can skip the triggers, or we can get to a point where we don't, and it's not. The triggers are the ultimate test, right or wrong, and this is the reason why I love that the scriptures that you read, and shout out to you, is because I tell people all the time, after Jesus got baptized by the Holy Spirit, he didn't go tell it on the mountain. He went back into the shadows for another 40 days and 40 nights to do battle with his own shadow self, his own illusions, his own belief that he has to bow to the external world. And he just self-confirmed that I need to, because he said, in order to be these people's messiahs, in order to lead the people, he knew he was going back into the world where people are obsessed with the bad foods, people obsessed with the bad social media, people obsessed with, all the things of the world. And he had to be able to point them to the things that wasn't consistent of the world. Because once again, when Ferdinand is telling you that you need to come to his space and cut off your phone, that's telling you, that's the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. That's him. That's you saying, okay, I want to be baptized. He didn't say, okay, good, go back into the world. No, we have to pull you out the world, because we have to do battle with your devils. We have to do battle with your shadows. We have to do battle with your lower, temporal vessel, so that you can, really go to the true essence and the true substance, and be, contained by that inner self. So that's dope stuff, man.
I appreciate that, my brother, and you right on point. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a little treat for everybody, okay? And
Uh-oh.
we're in episode 27. We're talking about shadow work here. You got Ferdinand and Ra, and we are pulling up Think and Grow Rich for you. All right, and I want to take you to a very important chapter for what we're talking about. Chapter 15: How to Outwit the Six Ghosts of Fear. Take inventory of yourself as you read this closing chapter, and find out how many of the ghosts are standing in your way before you can put any portion of this philosophy into successful use. Your mind must be prepared to receive it. The preparation is not difficult. It begins with study, analysis, and understanding of three enemies which you shall have to clear out. These are indecision, doubt, and fear. The sixth sense will never function while these three negatives, or any of them, remain in your mind. The members of this unholy trinity, this unholy trio, are closely related. Where one is found, the other two are close at hand. Indecision is the seedling of fear. Remember this as you read. Indecision crystallizes into doubt. The two blend and become fear. The blending process often is slow. This is one reason why these three enemies are so dangerous. They germinate and grow without their presence being observed. The remainder of this chapter describes an end which must be attained before the philosophy, as a whole, can be put into practical use. It also analyzes a condition which has, but lately, reduced huge numbers of people to poverty, and it states a truth which must be understood by all who accumulate riches, whether measured in terms of money or a state of mind of far greater value than money. The purpose of this chapter is to turn the spotlight of attention upon the cause and the cure of the 6 basic fears. Before we can master an enemy, we must know its name, its habits, and its place of abode. As you read, analyze yourself carefully and determine which, if any, of the 6 common fears have attached themselves to you. Do not be deceived by the habits of these subtle enemies. Sometimes they remain hidden in the subconscious mind, where they are difficult to locate and still more difficult to eliminate.
Man, listen, and I think we talked about this offline, what I'm learning through my journey, and it is, I understand, because sometimes you want to have a moment where you can kind of drift. And even in Outwitting the Devil, it talks about how drifting is the or even treading water. But what I realized, and I think I told you before, you have to choose a character. Every day is Shakespeare, to be or not to be. You don't have to. Because we already understand that even not choosing is choosing. So if you want to be in a state of indecision and kind of just let your reality choose for you that way, it will. But even Outwitting the Devil tells you that usually it chooses the adverse, the negative thing for whatever reason. I don't know why. If you don't consciously will and choose yourself and to affirm this is who I am, and usually I do really good at this. Sometimes I miss, but when I wake up in the morning, I always try to say, thank you. And I always say, this is the best day of my life. This is the greatest day of my life. Everything I wanted to happen happened today, and set the intention. It might seem monotonous to wake up and say it every day, but why not? Every day I want to feel like today is the best day of my life. So when I read that, and being indecisive, and how it's the seedling, to all other doubts. I think in shadow work is very important, because just like Christ, once he had the spirit of the Holy Spirit, he had to test himself and to see, did he really believe that he is who he is? Because your word is going to test you. It's going to show you certain things, and you have to have a certain conviction. The Bible said, like the weak man say, I am strong. So when the weakness of certain things are happening to you, you have to already have this thing predefined. You have to have this version of yourself, I would say even written out, written on your wall. I have certain things and sticky notes written on that wall, because once again, you're not going to always wake up and remember who you are. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have things around you. You're going to have friends, that see you how, in a certain state. Like shout out to Ferdinand. Sometimes I go to my little holes. He doesn't just leave me there waiting to come out. He come dig just to say, hey, I know you know you good, because you're going to need these certain things to remind you who you are. You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, appreciate it.
I had a flashback of some messages that I sent you. I'm pretty sure you know which ones I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's important to have the friends. When you're hungry out there in the wilderness and you're supposed to be fasting, yeah, you need your homies to come in and be like, "Hey, man, listen, sit down, man, relax, man." Look off into the hills, man. Think about how beautiful this is, man. Stay in the present. Stop worrying
And
about the
homies is good too, because usually neither one of you guys are going through it at the same time, but you're going to go through it. But that's the beautiful part about having friends, because what I've seen, usually it's not everyone going through the same. So you can, when you have friends that are on the same journey, you could be rest assured the universe is not going to be so cruel to send you both down. The test of am I or am I not? You know what I mean? So you're able to have that wise counsel. So definitely shout out to you, my brother.
So let's go ahead and come back to this book for a second, right?
Mm.
Let's go back to these 6 basic fears. There are 6 basic fears, with some combination of which every human suffers at one tune or another. Most people are fortunate if they do not suffer from the entire 6. Named in the order of their most common appearance, they are the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, most of ones, the fear of ill health, worries, the fear of loss of love of someone, the fear of old age, the fear of death. All other fears are of minor importance. They can be grouped under these 6 headings. The prevalence of these fears, as a curse to the world, runs in cycles for almost 6 years. While the Depression was on, we floundered in the cycle of fear of poverty. During the World War, we were in the cycle of fear of death. Just following the war, we were in the cycle of fear of ill health, as evidenced by the epidemic of disease which spread itself all over the world. Fears are nothing more than states of mind. One's state of mind is subject to control and direction. Physicians, as everyone knows, are less subject to attack by disease than ordinary laymen, for the reason that physicians do not fear disease. Physicians, without fear or hesitation, have been known to physically contact hundreds of people daily who were suffering from such contagious diseases as smallpox without being infected, without becoming infected. Their immunity against the disease consisted largely, if not solely, in their absolute lack of fear. Man can create nothing which he does not first conceive in the form of an impulse of thought. Following this statement comes another of still greater importance, namely, man's thought impulses begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent, whether those thoughts are voluntary or involuntary. Thought impulses which are picked up through the ether by mere chance, thoughts which have been released by other minds, may determine one's financial, business, professional, or social destiny just as surely as do the thought impulses which one creates by intent and design. Before I get too much in the weeds, I had to come back to you.
Man, he's like, y'all, man. It's shout out to you, man. Shout out to when we do this, man. It's always beautiful when certain things just trigger it and my mind goes in like in 100 different directions. But one thing that I want to actually just regurgitate on is that Napoleon Hill, when they put out the original, at least this was the story, that they had it pulled because they different people in different Masonic groups felt like that he was giving out too much information. One of those ones that they said that was really adamant about him changing certain words like vibrations and frequencies was Henry Ford, because they understand some of these ancient secrets. And once again, I told you this a couple weeks ago. I feel like sources making us put some of these things in certain orders because they're all connecting to each other. So one of the perfect things is I'm glad that we talked about the Kabbalion, because literally in that text that you said, he talked about seasons, and he talked about that the fears are things that are thoughts that come into thoughts, and they come in certain cycles, And then another thing, and just to see your face on this, Ferdinand, when he talked about the 6 different fears and how they have different cycles and man goes through each one, he started to show which ones the men go through. It also reminded me how you said that your mentor, Shetor, or a lady in your life, I don't know, I can't remember her title in your life, but she talked about how we didn't have 12 zodiacs, we're actually moving through 6. You know what I mean? Right. So this, to me, when I see those 6, those 6 fears and how he's talking about it runs in cycles, to me, this might be what man is perpetuating himself through these 6 cycles over and over and over again, not until he accomplishes 1 or 2, but all 6 unlocks a certain level of divinity, and a certain level of possibilities. And for him to say that fear are nothing but states of mind, so once again, that's a bold statement. You know what I mean? That's a bold statement that he's telling you that the thing that is happening in your life, even though these things are appearing first fearful, they started off as thought seed. So this is going back until when we're trying to tell you that we live in a mental plane. You know what I mean? So this is why, and even once again, shout out to a few episodes ago, we talked about being a polarized master. Basically, he's talking about the prevalence of these fears are as a curse to the world. They run in cycles. So if you know about being a polarized master and you understand that these different things that you can't see, these different shadows, you would know when a cycle is coming. We might be in a cycle. We were just in a cycle of ill health. That was the pandemic. We're about to seem like we're about to enter into a cycle of poverty with these tariffs and the economy's crashing. You know what I mean? So it just kind of reminded me of that when you talked about it only might be in 6 that we're going through, and those 6 cycles of fears right there. And then for him to say that there are different states of consciousness just goes to show the adept on how we're really dealing with high magic here, and we're showing you guys on how to use this thing in practicality, because it ain't even such thing as physicality to me. It's all spiritual. You know what I mean? Even when you're talking about working in the so-called 3D, you're still talking about working in the spiritual plane.
Absolutely. I'm about to get back in this thing right here, because this is getting deep right here. We are here laying the foundation for the presentation of a fact of great importance to the person who does not understand why some people appear to be lucky, while others of equal or greater ability, training, experience, and brain capacity seem designed to ride with misfortune. This fact may be explained by the statement that every human being has the ability to completely control his own mind. And with this control, obviously, every person may open his mind to the tramp thought impulses which are being released by other brains, or close the doors tightly and admit only thought impulses of his own choice. Nature has endowed man with absolute control over but one thing, and that is thought. This fact, coupled with the additional fact that everything which man creates begins in the form of a thought, leads
Mm,
one very near to the principle by which fear may be mastered. If it is true that all thought has a tendency to clothe itself in its physical equivalent, and this is true beyond any reasonable room for doubt, it is equally true that thought impulses of fear and poverty cannot be translated into terms of courage and financial gain. The people of America began to think of poverty following the Wall Street crash of 1929. Slowly but surely, that mass thought was crystallized into its physical equivalent,
mm.
which was known as a depression. This had to happen. It is in conformity with the laws of nature.
My God, my God, my God. And listen, this is why, you really, once you get bitten by this truth, you can't let it go. You know what I mean? Once you understand the mind and the type of world that we live in, it becomes extremely challenging, especially you're reading from 100-year-old books, and he's making it plain. But if you're not in the right spirit, it's easy to skip over what he's saying. You know what I mean? It's so easy to skip over what he's saying. And one thing that I want to address, because it's like I understand the law, but I have empathy, because we have something called generational trauma, right? Someone might say, well, 3-year-olds get harmed, 4-year-olds get harmed, 5-year-olds get harmed a lot of times, and because I haven't done with it in a professional setting like you, but I've consulted and just been an ear to people, men and women. And a lot of times when you're hearing, especially women, you're hearing their stories, it happened in the state where they were defenseless. So it's challenging for them to wrap their minds around the accountability piece that's needed to transmute it, because they felt like so. And this is where I want to touch on, because I think it's important. We have to understand that there are such things as generational church curses. We have to understand there's such thing as the daughter shall pay for the sins of the father. It doesn't seem like it's fair. It doesn't seem like it's right. But whatever traumas that the people who birthed you or the people who birthed them were not able to deal with, when you are born into this world, you vibrate at that frequency. Before you have a chance to control your own mind, you have to pay for the sins of the people who birthed you. And that's where a lot of our original traumas came from. Another important part of it talked about how these fears are seeming like that they're coming in the external, but they're first being transmitted from the parents, from the loved ones, in their minds, in the wombs. And these things are interceding while you don't even have a chance, while you're still in the work wheelhouse of the womb. You're getting implanted with fears that you don't even know. And when you come into this world, you're vibrating at that certain frequency that then thus pulls these situations to you. That's how unconditional that the universe is, and is no respecter of individual persons. It doesn't care about your altruism. It doesn't care about how much good that you want to get. It just knows frequency, and it knows what's in the shadows. It knows, the stuff that your grandmother didn't tell you, stuff that your mother didn't tell you. This is why family secrets usually destroy people, because you don't even understand what's going on and what's happening. And so got touched by the uncle. They didn't say nothing. And this is where, understanding that key point, and once again, I know that it's challenging, because I know that people have gone through things which it's hard to get them in the spirit to say, I know, but you have to somehow get on top of this thing, and you have to somehow internalize it and take the power away from other people's minds, other people's shames, other people's perception, because it's crystallizing you into a repetitive cycle of the same things over and over and over. And guess what? If you don't deal with it and you have children, right, unbeknownst to you, you might have tried to raise your daughter or your son in the most pristine external situations, but yet they still find themselves attracted, or a situation attracted to them, because of that trauma that's being passed generationally, and we don't know that. So this law is always at work. It's always going, even when we don't understand it. That everything that is happening in the external was first internal blueprint or internal frequency that then crystallized itself into an external experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, brother. You be coming with the fire, man. You
Hey
know,
man, appreciate you.
you the water, but you be coming with the fire sometimes. You know what I'm saying? But
That's why they name me Ra. They name me Ra to balance it out. You know what I'm
there you
saying?
go.
Water and fire.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah,
If you, but if, no, sorry, I want you to speak on that though. I want you to please, just for even me, I would love to hear your perspective on dealing with people that have been affected by the sins of the people, meaning that there was passed down trauma. This passed down trauma then crystallized itself into events in their lives. And how do we best help these people who were maybe done huge injustices, but at some point we have to get them to take control of the storyline and reperceptualize it in themselves so that it's no longer triggering and crystallizing. And what has happened has happened. We're not denying that, but we don't want to keep perpetuating it into the future. What advice would you have on that, my brother?
when we think about when we think about individuals who have faced massive amounts of trauma, and it might be generational. In my personal opinion, the absolute best thing we can do to help them is to be an example, to demonstrate the way forward. Because, like you were saying a little while ago, it might have been a couple minutes ago, being at certain vibrations, certain vibrational frequencies, well, if Ferdinand is at this vibrational frequency, and let's say that that a person I'm helping might be down here somewhere in their vibrational frequency. Not saying that they're any less intelligent or any better or worse than me, but their vibrational frequency is low. They're not going to be able to hear some of the things that I'm saying. Certain words are just not going to make it past the threshold. Not the way that they should, based upon the way that they're. If I pull this dictionary up and I pull up a word based upon that, right? This is what I'm communicating to the person. They're not going to be able to hear all of what I'm saying to them because there's some built up blocks and barriers, those crystallizations that you were just talking about. So in that space, what helps us best is when we have someone around us, and this is my opinion, when we have someone around us who is living that life of righteousness, who's living that whole health life, who has met their quote unquote demons or their shadow and have taken hold and taken control of that. The way that person's going to walk, the way that person's going to communicate, the way that person is just going to irradiate courage and authenticity is going to be different. They're going to show a different type of love for thyself. And that's going to be addictive to be around, but at the same time, it's probably going to be a little triggering. But if that person's around this other individual enough, well, they start to change. You can't take Pookie from the corner down the street and put him in the room with Bezos and Elon and all these guys, and Pookie stay Pookie. No, he's gonna become Mr. Pookie. It's gonna happen. He's gonna become Mr. Pookie. You can't put somebody who is not winning in a space of winners, and then that person doesn't eventually become a winner. Now, the same thing is true on the other side of the equation. This is part of the divine paradox. This is polarity, right? We were talking about it a little while ago. You take Elon and you put him on the corner, and you take away all his resources. After a while, he's gonna start acting like Pookie. Demonstration is a powerful, powerful form of suggestion, right? And in
Mm,
addition to demonstration, we want to encourage those who are suffering from generational trauma to visit the forest, go hiking,
mm,
go have a picnic out in nature, go spend enough time out in nature. You keep putting yourself out in nature with all these other suggestions of music and entertainment and all these other things. And eventually what happens is you're able to trace that trauma back. Your mind is going to find it because
Mm.
you allowed it to be clear enough to see the way forward or the way backward, right? That's all happening right now in real time. So hopefully I was able to answer your
No,
question.
that was great, man. Once again, you're always triggering me in a good way to build upon a new idea. So, man, and that was an unusual answer, but it was a great answer because most of the time it's other techniques, but people discard the power of proximity. Shout out to Tony Robbins, one of the first people I ever heard talked about that. And the power of being around someone who candle is already lit, just like Christ. And you said, earlier, who touched me? You know what I mean? These people needed him, but it was their own faith, but it was him as well. My sister one time told me, one time, when I was going through, my own shadow work period, maybe about 10 years ago. And she just was like, brother, you got to find your why. And I was like, what, my why? She said, yeah, your why, what hurts you? And I'm like, I just paused because I never heard you. I heard why, but she was able to say, what hurts you? It's
Mhm.
what hurts you that you're supposed to help elevate in other people, because as Ferdinand said, you become that way forward. You become the person that they can see themselves, and especially shout out to Ferdinand, and I'm gonna shout myself out. Our level of vulnerability, because most people try to act like they're perfect, right? And once again, you're trying to live up to perfection when you're able to be vulnerable and say, hey, I was once this, or I was once that, or even like I like to tell people, I still struggle, because there's not going to be no person that's not going to be able to struggle. Go ahead, my
I got to jump
brother.
in here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One of the things I really appreciate about what you just brought up concerning your sister saying, "Hey, what's your why?" Right? When I went through this process of letting everything go, I sat down and I said to myself, I said, "Man, I've been accepting second place for a long time,
Mm.
and and this vessel right here, this is a Lamborghini. This is a freaking jumbo jet, hitting the sound barrier. Like that's what this thing can do. So how am I accepting second best?" And I
Mm.
had to go through that in my mind. It was like a battle that happened where first was about to win. Well, not didn't about to win. It won, but for a while, first was duking it out with second,
Right.
and and first had to come with some jabs and some hooks,
Right.
and it was something that had to happen in my mind that became my new why. My new why helped me to shape this new foundation, that the only way this new why could stand on it was if it was the absolute truth.
Mm. Facts. And the thing that you talk about nature, man, it's crazy because it's always the simplest solutions that's the most effective, but the ones that get overlooked, especially in spiritualism with all this extra stuff. So, one thing I love about your message, man, that you keep it simple. You have like your 6 keys. You talk about purity. You talk about getting in there. I ask you, so tell me. So I'm thinking, me. I go reach something extra. You just say, go in nature, get around fire, go listen to what. And I'm like, man, these things are so simple, but they're the most important things because, and that's what my uncle used to tell me, like, because I love books. And I shout out to him because he's been like my little spirit animal angel all rolled into one, because he's always testing me in little ways I don't realize they're tested 2 years later, but I'm all in my books. He sees I'm all in my books. He's like, nephew, what did man read before there was no books? Because he just felt like, okay, yeah, you in the books, but you too much in the books. You're not getting the real. He was trying to show me there's an education out here that's just out in the world, out in nature, out in the forest, out in trees that I'm not getting because I'm in the book. I'm in the book. And I'm not understanding that, God has hidden, really not hidden, the most profound educations and the most profound healing, right in nature, even all the way down to the herbs. So when you say these little things like getting in nature, we don't understand, like you said, there's a certain golden ratio, there's a certain Fibonacci sequence, there's a certain medicine that the Most High has imbued and embedded in nature, in the most simplest things, that gives you the reset. So when you go into your shadows, you're going with like a little bit of a light, You know what I mean? You're going with a little bit of I don't know, an absorber, you know what I mean? So that you're able to revisit these same, once again, it's called shadow work because these are things that you're not looking at. So you're going into the, but most time we're going to the shadow with no light, or our light is extinguished. What Ferdinand is proposing just by simple things about getting around simple earth elements, and then we already read the research that what happens when you ground. So a lot of us are being triggered. We're not grounding. A lot of us are trying to do shadow work, but we're not grounding. What happens if you're in nature? Now you're trying to pull up these things. And now since you're completely at a different frequency, you're able to observe them from what they were. You're able to get the message out of them. You're able to pause, but eat the, what they could eat the bone, but spit out the, whatever the case is, you know what I mean? And get to that level. But it, you know, it is challenging. I'm from New York City. So when we're talking about trying to, I was trying to do certain work in New York City, and I swear, and you know me, I'm a strong spirited person, but it felt like it was impossible. I was trying to stay up. I was trying to stay up there.
Questions up there. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, because you know I ain't no quitter. So I'm trying to like, nah, I shouldn't have to do that. But I had to. I'm in Texas now. I had to completely get myself out of the environment because low key it was catching me. And I think that I'm winning. But even when you're meditating, someone's screaming out the window, his horns popping, is, and yeah, you're supposed to be able to have peace, but to know peace, you have to know peace. You know what I mean? So which means, like you said, yes, Elon, he might survive for a moment in that environment with his beliefs intact, but eventually, if he doesn't have some sort of help with maintaining that frequency, that environment is going to drown him, and then he's going to be, as my boy said, Mr. Pookie. You know what I mean? So, when it comes to, and this is why you have to be serious about trauma healing, because when you understand what happens on the other side, here's the thing: most of us have been carrying these weights in these backpacks so long, we think it's normal. We're so used to operating at 20 and 30%. We don't think that there's another percentage that we can even act out of. So when we say, oh, I'm going to do this work, or I'm going to do the parasite cleanse, we only think that we're going to get like a 5%, a 2% increase. You know what I mean? Because we think that we're operating at our capacity. But what you get, yes, it might seem like a step back when you're going to spend out a week at Ferdinand's retreat, or you're going to book an Airbnb out of the way, or whatever the case that you're doing. But what you get from these so-called resets in these moments of reflections, the person who you come back as is not the same person. And you still need to take breaks, because right now, right, I'm in this certain state. And if I would go back to New York, my torch would probably stay lit for a month, 2 months. But guess what? If I don't come out and maybe go see Ferdinand, or come out to Texas, or come hop out the city, that light is going to diminish. And then I'm going to become, I've lived it, and I'm going to become just like the people that is around me, is because it's only but so long that you're going to be able to deal with those energies, even if you're the toughest, even if you're the brightest warrior, without having to disconnect a lot of it. So once again, I just want to just harp on how these solutions that Ferdinand is presenting, they might seem simple, but they're the most profound. If you're in a city, or if you're in, which most of us are, especially if you're Black, most of Black people are concentrated into urban areas, meaning that we're stacked on top of each other. So if you're not taking time to go out into nature and to go and detach yourself from society, not just once. Shadow work isn't something that you do once. Remember, these are permanent states. These are permanent cycles. These are So once again, I think a lot of us think that too. We go so far on the journey, and we might not have been triggered by trigger 1, trigger 2, but then trigger 4 hits us, and we're like, oh my God, and you throw away your whole thing. Like, no. Yes, it's just that you didn't detach. You thought the meditation you did last week was going to help you this week. You thought that you and Ferdinand's call that you did last month was going to help you this. No, it's a repetitive thing. It's not a one. This is why I love being a Scorpio, because Scorpios, and you read about us, we go through many dark nights of the soul. It's not, some people go through 1 or 2. I go through them over and over and over, because that's where all the growth is. That's where, when you start to doubt yourself, and that's when you can kind of reprogram and recalibrate. You know what I mean? So I'm not afraid of the darkness and the trauma, because I realized, once again, even when Jesus wanted to perform his greatest miracles, he had to go sit with himself for a period of time. You know what I mean? And I would say, and you give me your opinion, just like I would say we should do 4 detoxes per year, once a quarter. And I know this is kind of rich, because not that it costs a lot, but a lot of people just don't maybe have the lifestyle where they can do it. But I would say at least 4 times out of the year, once a quarter, you need to have 2, 3, if a week, if you're lucky, to where you could kind of detach, put your, tell certain people, hey, I'm not going to be near the phone. Hey, I'm not going to be near the email. Hey, I'm not going to be. Mind you, when your body is saying, oh, that's scary, that's the devil winning. That's you in the desert, eating, turning the bricks, taking yourself down, all the stuff that he was trying to get Jesus to do. When you're not saying, no, I can't put the external world away for 2 days, 3 days, maybe even an extended weekend, a staycation. You didn't book a trip and go, you stayed with yourself and you made it intimate. When you decide that these are too costly for you to do, that's you being in the desert and succumbing to the devil. Take your time, brother. Take your time.
You hit a few points, right? Which was the one that you wanted me to speak to? 'Cause it was like a couple minutes ago, but I really
Oh
want.
yeah, man. Oh yeah. Oh shit. I wanted you to. I wanted you to speak to how many times per year would you
Right.
say
Okay.
that we should be, especially, we're a little bit different with our lifestyles, but for
I got
the
that.
regular person, for the average person.
Okay, so I used to recommend to people that they detox 3 to 4 times a year, quarterly, more often than not. But then I read some scientific articles that about how it could cause some issues with the gut lining, right? To detox that much. Well, why? Because not everybody's getting the same mineral content in their food every day. Not everybody's getting the same amount of exercise. Not everybody's building their temple, at the same rate, right? So I think that what's wise that everybody really could do, just about everybody. Let's say that like 98% of humanity, um, 4 times a year, do a prolonged fast.
Mm.
Following one of those prolonged fasts, then they do like a 10-day detoxification kit from Root Tribes or from whatever their choice holistic health provider is. And I see that as being a much safer option for,
Mm.
as almost like a one size fits all approach. Uh, because detoxification only really becomes necessary when we start accumulating too many toxins.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if we
Mm.
reduce the amount of toxins that we bring in, one detox a year, in my personal opinion, should be more than enough with those
Mm.
fasts, because the fasting is a natural detoxification.
Now, what about when the physical? What about nature detoxification? Because I'll say that too for myself, being from an urban city. Need to purposefully, because every time I do it, maybe get to go to a lake, go to a stream, just sit out. Oh my goodness, you come back and you can feel that. So, is
Yeah.
that something that you advise people like monthly, or is it like especially for the busy bird? Like, what would you advise that people like? This is like, I know it might even cost some people, but people spend money on type of things, but to get themselves disconnected in a place where there's not a lot of electronics, not a
Mhm.
lot to wear. And how long would you say, it suffice? 48 hours good enough, or a week, three? Like, what would be your thoughts on that?
Daily.
Mm.
However, for those who aren't able to do it daily, then definitely weekly.
Mm.
If you can't do it weekly, you gotta do it monthly. It's
Mm.
gotta be at least one time of out the year where a couple of hours you're out at the park or something, and you didn't take your phone, you left it in the car. Like this type of detox, for lack of a better term, or this ingestion into nature puts you back in your home.
Mm.
You get to be in your real home during that time. So now you get to come back to reality.
Mm.
So the illusion that we live most days, for most of us, really every day, it doesn't become so crystallized in our mind that we're not able to see the real truth.
Mm.
Because think
Nah.
about it, man. When we go out to nature,
Mm.
we don't see too many 90-degree angles. There's not too many squares. There's not too many rectangles. I don't see none of that stuff out there unless it's a gardener who has purposely grown a tree or a bush into a
Mm.
specific form, right? So outside of that, we have what nature provides, which is the golden ratio, the
Mm.
Fibonacci sequence. We have the building blocks of life in nature. We have oxygen in nature. We have
Mm.
every type of mineral that's needed for the human body. We have it all out in nature, right? So when we ingest ourselves in that space, and like you said, I know you're asking about frequency of when to do it, and I want to be clear with everybody out here. Yes, I do serve as a holistic health provider, but in this advice that I'm giving right now, this is my personal opinion. Okay, so I'd have to do more research to see what how the blood count and the iron
Mm.
levels and all of this changes, right? But based on what I've seen from my own experience,
Nah, bro,
yeah,
you cooking.
I gotta get out there. I
Yes.
gotta get out there at least once a week.
Now, just to add to what you said, man, I don't even. I mean, I know you know what you said, but just to when a lot of times you see when you're speaking, my brain be working. But how you talked about how there isn't too many, like rectangles and squares and cylinders. So, nature does have more of a different perspective. So it almost made me feel like even right now, we're in man's world. I see nothing but, I was eating some oatmeal. I have a round pot. We have a phone here. We have, what I mean? So these are, you talked about the not the original world, because before any of these things were created, none of these things existed. When the world that God created didn't have buildings that came pre-populated. It didn't have temples that came pre-populated. It didn't have screens and squares and rooms and walls that came pre-populated. God gave us the earth. So there is a different frequency there. When we're dealing with buildings and technology, we're more so dealing with the Maya, because it's man-made to a degree. It has to consist of them circles and rectangles and things, which draws us away from the truth, more into the illusion. And then we don't spend enough time in origin, truth, which is nature, which is helping us maintain that balance. Because just think about it. You said daily, I would say daily, because why not? You go to that office space daily, you're getting in your car daily, you're getting to all these things that we made that is causing a frequency, and you're not getting. And then if you live in a major city, you took the God's origin, and then we layered man on top of it. We layered buildings and skyscrapers and even the streets, all
Right.
shapes. And what you made me help me understand is that I'm looking in my room. I might think these things are good, but they might also be altering my frequency and vibration, because this is not a man's natural state. It's not natural for a man as a human being to look and see walls and things. These are things that we came into the open and we built this on top of that. You know what I mean? Now, if they came on the planet when we got here, then we could say something different. But what you helped me and this is probably gonna send me down a rabbit hole this week, you know what I mean, is how much is us looking at forks and spoons and all these things that we created diminishing our soul? Because even though these things are valid things in the Maya, but these are things that did not come with the planet. We had to mold and we had to fashion, and we spend more time looking at these things than we do just, once again, how many times do I get water from here? Versus my hand was probably meant to cup and drink water from you know what I mean? My naturalness. This is not natural to do this. Because if it was, we will come out the womb with plastic and bottles and it will already be there. This will be grown from a water tree, and you just come and just take your water from a water tree versus eating your water. So nah, man, like I said, I'm kind of freestyling out loud, but when you said that, I was like, man, that is profound. And shout out to you. I never thought about it that way, that these shapes that we are so normal for us are not presented to themselves in the most rawest form of nature. Nature has more abstract shapes that even when we stare at it, bro, you know what I mean? And I have a tree in the backyard. I need to hug it more, but every time I go hug the tree, I feel the resonance. And once again, is the tree just straight up as a rectangle? No, the tree does this and spin and curves and follows different golden ratios you did. So shout out to you, brother. I don't, like I said, maybe you didn't know how profound, but when you said that, and how, like I said, my whole entire room, it has to be formatted in certain shapes for me to even make sense of it. But guess what? Me being in this room too much, it gets me depressed. You ain't never heard no one said, I'm in nature too much, so I'm depressed. You know what I mean? I'm in the four corners of the park, so now I'm sad and depressed. It's usually when we are in these man-made structures. We're in our car, we're at the Starbucks, and we're just going from man-made structure to man-made structure, square circles thing, that we get depressed. So I think that was really profound, man. That
Peep
you
this,
said
right?
that.
I thank you. I really appreciate that. And then peep this. We're talking about shadow work, y'all. Episode
Hmm.
23. You got Ferdinand and Ra here. And when we look at shadow work, these walls, these 90-degree angles, these squares and these rectangles, They help us hide the shadow. They help us keep the veil over it. All right.
Mm.
I ain't gonna go too deep into that. I want to bring y'all back to the books for a second. All right.
Oh
We
man.
got another treat for y'all. Everybody who's out there, thank y'all for being here today. Is episode 27 on Two Brothers and an Idea. We're talking about shadow work. It's Ferdinand and Ra. And right now we're looking at The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. All right, so I want to take y'all to a very important 3 chapters that will help us to heal from the issues of that's going on with the shadow. So, how to use your subconscious mind for forgiveness. Understand that forgiveness is a big piece of the shadow work. Many a times things are happening and it may be outside of our control. So, Rob brought this up a little while ago. He was talking about sexual assault victims and how there's a certain amount of accountability that they've got to take. Well, that's what this chapter is about. It's about forgiving, right? We can definitely think about forgiving others, but we need to more so be thinking about how we forgive ourselves. Life plays no favorites. God is life, and this life principle is flowing through you this moment. God loves to express himself as harmony, peace, beauty, joy, and abundance through you. This is called the will of God or the tendency of life. If you set up resistance in your mind to the flow of life through you, this emotional congestion will get snarled up in your subconscious mind and cause all kinds of negative conditions. God has nothing to do with unhappy or chaotic conditions in the world. All these conditions are brought about by man's negative and destructive thinking. Therefore, it is silly to blame God for your trouble or sickness. Many persons habitually set up mental resistance to the flow of life by accusing and reproaching God for the sin, sickness, and suffering of mankind. Others cast the blame on God for their pains, aches, loss of loved ones, personal tragedies, and accidents. They are angry at God, and they believe He is responsible for their misery. As long as people entertain such negative concepts about God, they will experience the automatic negative reactions from their subconscious mind. Actually, such people do not know that they are punishing themselves. They must see the truth, find release, and give up all condemnation, resentment, and anger against anyone or any power outside themselves. Otherwise, they cannot go forward into a healthy, happy, or creative activity. The minute these people entertain a God of love in their minds and hearts, and when they believe that God is their loving Father who watches over them and cares for them, guides them, sustains and strengthens them, this concept and belief about God or the life principle will be accepted by their subconscious mind, and they will find themselves blessed in countless ways.
Man, that word forgiveness has been a word that I have like dove down and broke down and had some epiphanies on throughout the years. Because we don't understand that it's we're waiting for heal. Most people want to heal, but it's given you shall receive. And when I even see for meaning before or something that is a precedent or pro or pre, and then give. So it's telling you, in order to get this thing, you have to forgive it. It's a thing that happens before you see it. There's a hole, and you have to forgive the whole. You know what I mean? And and that's how it broke down to me in spirit a couple years ago, and was saying that this is why forgiveness is a solo job, because if you want to receive some sort of release from your troubles, there, unfortunately, I know we've been taught, right? And I'm speaking as empathetically as I can to my people. I know we've been taught that there is some sort of outside source that's going to save us, some sort of universe, some sort of God, some sort of spirit. And I don't want to just be blunt, but I have to be blunt because I really want to help. There is nothing outside of yourself. It's a self-redemptive story. It is a self-forgiving entity, energy that we have to embody. And we just have to allow. Some of us are so filled with sickness and dis-ease that we can't even allow our imagination to formulate the words of forgiveness. We can't even allow our imagination to think of, I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. We can't even allow our minds to say, I deserve, I'm righteous, I'm pure. We can't, we're so down in our trauma, and we're waiting for someone else outside of us to give us the permission to use these words on ourselves. And unfortunately, there is no one coming for you. At some point, and Ferdinand, you know that this has been my motto, at some point you have to look at self, and you have to look at your entirety of self without wanting to change it and say, I love you as you are. I love because some of us, once again, we've been through certain things that maybe you did not have a position to protect yourself, but now you're wearing that shame. You're thinking, what could I have done? You have to just look at yourself totally and just forgive all things about yourself. You know what I mean? In order to receive. And even me, once again, there's certain people who I have been wanting to hold things against. But once you start getting to this science, you start to understand you cannot hold anything else against anyone else. Somehow it's affecting you. Because even when you're thinking of this person or situation and you're in your mind replaying angst or things against them, you can't do nothing to no one. You're doing it somehow to your own self. You know what I mean? So this is why it has to be a level of, and that word, once again, look up the forgiveness. It's telling you that it's something that happens before. It happens to you. It happens in your mind. It happens in your spirit. It happens in your soul. And most of it isn't something that you have to change. It's more about acceptance. But what do they say? That you cannot change what? Things that you do not what? Accept. So some of us have gone through traumatic situations and we don't even want to accept that it happened to us. You know what I mean? Because of the shame or the guilt or the whatever that comes with it. You know what I mean? But acceptance allows you to change. Knowing your demons, not just knowing you have demons, Ferdinand, but knowing their names, what they are, who they are, to be able to confess it with your mouth and your tongue. I am this, I am that. Allows you, we understand polarity, because you might say, oh, I'm stressed out. But if the adept says it, he understands polarity. And when I'm saying that I'm stressed out, I'm creating the opposite. So then I can say after that, I've confessed my sins, but now I am whole, or I was stressed out, or I was weak, but now I am strong. And just like Ferdinand said, once again, thank you even for these little jewels. I asked them, basically going out to nature is a form of prayer. I'm asking them, when should we pray? Once a month, once every month. My brother said every day. Every day we should be praying. Every day we should be reaching a state of purity. Every day we should be denoising, which nature does this for us. And we do understand this. Once again, it's something beautiful about the works of a man's hand, but it's something depressing that the man is so unsatisfied with the works of his own hand. You know what I mean? And I have a friend, right? Had this nice crib. Crib is nice. Pool in the backyard, everything else, but he's already unsatisfied because he's thinking about his next big move, his next big house. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting here not in the present, you know what I mean? And not just understanding that at some level you can aspire for higher four walls, but it's something about worshiping these four walls that makes you depressed. And it's somehow, no matter how much four walls you build around yourself, look at celebrities. They just think, if I can just buy my mama, they'll get these. And then at first it works. And it pushes you away from the shadow. But then those shadows start to come back around. And then instead of you getting into more of a nature spot, instead of you going out and, doing things and being in silence and trying to denoise yourself, trying to purify yourself, we become more slothful. We become more greed. We become, you know what I mean? Because once again, we understand even sitting with self long enough. To say that I'm going to sit in nature means that I have to sit in self. This is why I asked you earlier, how can we give them more of the spirit of confrontation? Because going in nature is confrontational with self.
Because as a result of the toxicity levels being so high. See, if the toxicity levels aren't so high and the perspective on regress trauma is favorable, now what happens when we walk into nature is harmony.
Right, exactly. So, like you said, we're at such a point of spiritual acidosis, not even the physical too, but we understand, right? Let's just go back into what we know. if we're experiencing a high level of dis-ease in the body, we have to be experiencing a high level of acidosis of the spiritual world too, because it cannot crystallize, right? It's not the body, then the mind, right? Unless we're going to change the laws. It's somehow in the mind, and these things are crystallizing itself into the physical counterpart, of the body. So you're absolutely right. And once again, to come up with a better word, I'll say that a lot of us in spiritual acidosis so much that something that's supposed to be so natural and of ease feels like confrontation. You know how many people I had to say I can't meditate, and really what they're saying is that I can't sit with myself long enough. I have to keep in the illusion. You know what I mean? Because this is actually making me less sad than sitting with my confrontation, sitting with the conflict inside of me that nature tends to bring. But the only way we know, even with your trauma, guys, and I don't know if Ferdinand has a quick trick way, but what happens is that when you're in a certain environment, when you have less noise and you're pure, your trauma comes up and it reaches a crescendo and then it dissipates. Right. But most of us, as soon as it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable, we run away from it, not knowing that it's us sitting with it long enough. You can have a little bit of reactions, but it's sitting with it long enough to watch it come and to watch it dissipate. You know what I mean? And to know that you didn't get swept away with it. Somehow it came, you saw it left, but yet you still remain. And that's what I feel like is building off of my brother said. What happens when you are in nature, you're able to confront these evils, these devils, in a better way. And shout out to my brother, because once again, man, like I said, I just want to stress out, it seems like it's a small nugget, but it's a huge nugget when we're talking about doing shadow work, because I was someone who was trying to do shadow work in like a place like New York City. It wasn't working. I came down to Texas, where you can literally feel the air is different. The tension in the air is different. And I was able to now, I was cut off for those 2-3 years. It felt like spiritually that I was in New York. And shout out to Ace, because he knows I used to call him on the phone complaining, and I'm not even a complainer, but I'm in this city and I can't. And yes, I'm having a lot of external things happen. It's a busy city. A lot of so-called external wins, things that if I even showed you, you'd be like, yo, Rod, you walked away from that. But yes, the more it was stacking, the more depressed I was becoming, because it was something inside of me that was getting drowned out. And I realized if I don't get away from this now, I'm going to be swept in of this. I'm not going to be able to get from underneath it, because you start, and this is what I think some people do in the external world. They reach so much success and balance, they're still so unbalanced, but what it will cost them to even step away for a month or two, they're not willing to pay that cost now. You know what I mean? So they stay in the disease, in the sickness, because in their mind, they've convinced themselves, I'm too far gone.
I appreciate you bringing that up, my brother. And I'm going to bring us back to the book, because there's a lot of that energy that needs forgiveness. Each person, they need to forgive themselves for whatever it may be. They're going to have to figure these things out. They're connected to trauma. But when I hear a person say, I can't meditate, I don't like drinking water, I know automatically that this is tied to fear, guilt, doubt, and disbelief. This is tied directly to perspective on regress trauma. It is important to forgive yourself, and it's important to move forward with the intention to be whole. Not just to be healed, to be whole and to be balanced. So let's go back to the book for a second. Life always forgives you. Life forgives you when you cut your finger. The subconscious intelligence within you sets about immediately to repair it. New cells build bridges over the cut. Should you take some tainted food by error, life forgives you and causes you to regurgitate it in order to preserve you. If you burn your hand, the life principle reduces the edema and congestion and gives you new skin, tissue, and cells. Life holds no grudges against you, and it is always forgiving you. Life brings you back to health, vitality, harmony, and peace if you cooperate by thinking in harmony with nature. Negative, hurtful memories, bitterness, and ill will clutter up and impede the free flow of the life principle in you. How he banished that feeling of guilt. I knew a man who worked every night until about 1 o'clock in the morning. He paid no attention to his 2 boys or his wife. He was always too busy working hard. He thought people should pat him on the back because he was working so arduously and persistently past midnight every night. He had a blood pressure of over 200 and was full of guilt. Unconsciously, he proceeded to punish himself by hard work, and he completely ignored his children. A normal man does not do that. He is interested in his boys and in their development. He does not shut his wife out of his world. I explained to him why he was working so arduously. There is something eating you inside. Otherwise, you would not act this way. You are punishing yourself, and you have to learn to forgive yourself. He did have a deep sense of guilt. It was toward a brother. I explained to him that God was not punishing him, but that he was punishing himself.
Man,
I could feel you had something.
I mean, no, it's just more, it's just more understanding that it's mind, it's psychology. Shame is another word that I've talked a lot about and dove into on how shame, whether it's something that happened from a childhood or something, and then how it manifests itself. And I have a friend that I was talking about, and he's trading too. We talked about how the other day, because he's doing extremely well, right? He's doing extremely well for himself, but certain situations when it comes to trading, he might put himself in a precarious situation. He asked himself like, yo, why did I do that? But me being his friend and hearing certain things, I was able to convey to him like, yo, man, you have to believe that you deserve this, man. You know what I mean? Like, I don't never, you don't really celebrate your wins. You know what I mean? And he's operating in his own bubble. So I have some other traders around me, so I have a good understanding of like, yo, this is a win, this is a loss. But he's operating his own bubble. He's operating basically under 0.111% of traders could actually even operate within. But since he doesn't have anything that he's comparing himself, he's looking at himself like he's not doing good, and I need to do more. And I had to tell, I said, yo, brother, don't you know if you actually hit the numbers that you're trying to hit, you're going to become a part of 0.000000001% of people who ever lived, and they might have only did it what you're trying to do once. You're trying to do it every single day. You know what I mean? So that's just another story of how sometimes unconsciously we might have these stories that we're telling ourselves, and we're winning at life. But since we have some sort of story or unconscious story that we're having play all the time, we're unconsciously punishing ourselves. You know
What happens a lot of the times with people is you got those rare amount of people who set astronomical goals, right? But everybody sets goals in some which way, shape, or form. And what we don't really realize sometimes is even though we didn't hit Galaxy ZB13, we bumped our head on Saturn. We don't be realizing this. We don't be realizing we bump our head on the moon. A lot of other people having trouble, getting a 40-inch vertical. You bumped your head on the moon. So you didn't make it to Galaxy ZB13, but you bumped your head on the moon.
And this is why I say humility is important. But humility to me just means grounded in oneself, which is just mean being self-aware. And shout out to you. And, I like to give you credit. Shout out to you because I see you give me credit, but I like to give me credit too. And I say shout out to you because you're like me, which we have no problem saying good stuff about ourselves. You know what I mean? And shout out to my boy, you know what I mean? My other boy, because he always speaks, he not always, but he talks to himself in third person. Like he says his name in third person. You know what I mean? So let's just act like his name is Roy Jones. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna say his real name, but he just was like, one thing I know, man, Roy Jones has to be his biggest cheerleader. There's no one that thinks more important of Roy Jones than Roy Jones. You know what I mean? I'm speaking as my friend. And when he said that, I said, man, like this is why you've achieved throughout ever since I've known you, because he really has a some people might call it arrogance and things, but he really has a self-confidence that no matter what his world is showing him, he feels like he's going to win, and his life has given him evidence of that. You know what I mean? And he has a real a self-belief about himself, and doesn't come off as arrogant sometimes, but if you're really his friend, you understand it's not arrogant. He's just highly confident on himself. So this is why, you know, being able to look at yourself and say, no, I'm dope at that. No, I'm good at that. And stop always downplaying yourself. Yes, I do it sometimes just to have fun. Like, yeah, I might. Yeah, I might. But even when I say it, you can feel like I'm playing. Like, no, I'm nice, and we're nice, and we're dope. And even one time, and Ferdinand said it last episode, and I said it the episode before that, is like when we were chopping up content, and I was saying, like, yo, these are some of the best, you know what I mean, types of conversation that is happening in the entire internet. And it's not to, you know, be braggadocious, but it's to be able to look at self and acknowledge where you are. You know, I'm able to see where I'm at in my journey. Hopefully Ferdinand's able to see where he's at in this journey, and he's able to give himself kudos and give him credits. And you know why? Because guess what? The kudos that you think that your girlfriend is going to give you, she's not. The kudos that you think your wife's supposed to give you, she's not. The kudos you think that your brother or your mother's supposed to give you, they not, because only you really know what you've been overcoming. They don't really know what you've been overcoming. And most times they're so busy in their own stuff, they don't see the things that you see. And we're waiting for this praise to come outside of us that I don't think, in my opinion, that's ever going to measure up to the self-praise that you give yourself. You know what I mean? And then what happens when, like, you're like a Kanye before he gets signed, and everyone around you say, no. We just want your beats. And he's forcing himself, his rapper self, upon you. He's forcing it upon you. Now, what have happened if he would have been like, Ferdinand, you know what, you right, you know you right. I should. No, he had such a self-confidence, a confidence, such a self-belief that it pushed him past beyond anyone else's belief. And he did not need, when I don't know, I can look at it. Maybe he needed his mom or someone else to say, you know what, yay, you are. But from what it perceives, he did not need no one else to corroborate with his story. You know what I mean? He reached a level which I feel like you need, of self-narcissism. You need a touch of it. And you need a touch of it to where maybe sometimes people are off-put about it. You know what I mean? But when it comes to this spiritual game, you have to have something in you that lets you know that I'm the ish, I'm that dude, or I'm that girl, I'm that king, or I'm that queen. And you can't make it feel like, oh, I'm being too this. No. Do not bend to it, because if you don't say it, who is going to say it? And if we understand Muhammad Ali, when he first started as Cassius Clay, no one liked him. They even hated him more when he became Muhammad Ali. But what did he kept saying? They thought he was young. He was braggadocious. Who are you to say I'm the greatest? And come to find out, he didn't even believe it. But he figured, like he said, if I just keep saying it enough, maybe they will believe it. Then maybe I will believe it. And then now Muhammad Ali, and I love boxing. He's not the greatest boxer by far, but when people talk about him, they said he's the greatest. But he said it first. He used his mind telepathy, whatever it's called, mind transmission, to implant these self-thought. But he didn't even believe them at first, but it did not stop him from speaking it out loud and speaking it with the conviction that then thus created a title, now that he's gone, to where we're acknowledging him as the greatest. So, and you can speak on it too, my brother, just to let people know your perspective, because I look at you as a very self-confident man. I never look at you as braggadocious. I never look at you as arrogant. My man said he can play 20 people with both his arms tied behind his back and a blindfold on, using his toes, playing chess. And as he should, I'm playing. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but this is the confidence
really
that
not
you
exaggerating.
Need,
I can literally do
that. Right. So just talk to me about, especially when it comes to shadow work, because at some point the Bible says, let the weak man say, I am strong. So at what point do you feel, and you know, that people should start having, and you talk about Max Walt's book, by having just this strong conviction, even before they might believe it, but they need to start digesting on some of this strength, this internal strength?
So in the beginning of my journey, you know, and I talked a little bit about that fight that happened between first and second in my mind, right? I started to call myself names that was aligned with high level leadership, royalty, and things of that nature, right? So one of my hashtags on my Facebook posts was the Shell Road billionaire, right? So if you've ever been to Hampton, Virginia, and you've been to Shell Road, probably doesn't look like too many billionaires live out there. However, I knew at that point that it was a mindset. I knew that if I became a billionaire within, if I became wealthy within, then my existential reality would reflect the same. So I
Mm,
was using words of power. I was using the law of suggestion. What we experience in repetition, we become. So you can feed yourself suggestions. You can also allow yourself to be fed suggestions. And it just depends on how a person chooses to set up their sacred geometrical algorithm for their life. Well, for
mm,
me, I was using words on a consistent basis of love, authenticity, compassion, empathy, billionaire, wealth, whole health. I was making sure that when I was writing, I was making sure these was keywords that I had in the things that wrote. I wrote affirmations that were filled with these words, and they were flooding my subconscious because I wasn't sitting around watching TV. I
mm,
wasn't reading Zane books. I was staying away from certain content. I was staying away from certain people, and that way the suggestions as they came in, they had way more power than they had
mm,
ever had before because they weren't in a conflict or they weren't in a fight with the negative polarized side of that energy.
mm. Nah, man, that's once again very simple principles, but work because there's an auto suggestion of the negativity that's working against it. You know what I mean? There's a thought, then there's a trigger, then there's other memories and things that take place. One of the most important things I've heard about so-called shadow work and working with this trauma forgiveness, and of course it takes you sometimes years to realize the most simplest of things. But some of us think that this trauma is something that we have to keep wrestling with. We have to keep bringing it up. And I think to a degree, you do wrestle with it to learn that it's more about letting go. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's more about not keep tossing and turning and figure out what's in it and what's the message in it, but to accept that it happened, realize that it happened, let it go, and then focus on identifying yourself with the version that's whole. You know what I mean? Because once again, what is surrender and submission? Absolutely. Because what does it made to be whole? What does the person that is whole in your mind says? What does he think? What does the person do? At some point, you're going to have to put in the law of rehearsal and start to rehearse these things. Some things that I like to do, I like to journal from the perspective of the person that I want to be. So if you did experience a lot of pain around relationships or trauma, how about you spend a day in nature with herbs and things that'll make you pure and journaling you because this is auto suggestion from the lifestyle of the person who found the perfect love, from the lifestyle of the person who is whole, from the lifestyle of the person that does eat better, that does, because we already understand that even if you physically can't do it in the physicality, right, the lower magic, there is something to reordering and rearranging the mind in a certain way that if you do it enough that the body would follow. So and it might seem advantageous or it might seem like that you're working backwards, that say like if there was a personal trauma with food that you could not relinquish, but you spent a day or two journaling from the perspective of the person who did surrender it, and you talked about your accomplishment, how you were able to lose weight, how easy it was to eat healthy, and you remember when you couldn't eat healthy, and you're writing, you might think these things aren't working, but they're writing the soundtrack for tomorrow's story that your subconscious can then use to feed you different actions and different things. And if you want to butt in, my brother, you surely can. But when you talked about the auto suggestions and these little things, I don't want people to think, because once again, Ferdinand hit you with some truth that's so simple. It didn't stimulate your dopamine. It didn't spike you that you'll miss it. And I want to come in to just tell you like, yo, these things that he's giving you are the really the building block. So even once again, I'll just leave you with this to take his story of how he had to sit and journal his affirmation. And I'm pretty sure when he was journaling, his environment might have said one thing to where he should not be writing these words out, his affirmation. He should be writing what he sees. Oh, today was so bad and da 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 da. But he used auto suggestions, what we talked about before, and so did I. But he used it in such a way to where him writing it down impressed himself, and now you're looking at the version that you see today. So just for you to touch back on that, my brother, when you were doing certain journals, was your environment aligning to what you were writing, or did you have to write it first before your environment started to align? If you can touch on that.
Let's just go to the journal and let's
Uh-oh.
take a look. So here goes one of my affirmations that I've written, and
Mm.
I think it's very powerful. So I'm going to read it for everybody. I am. I am the creator of my life. I am healed. I am thankful for my body's biological processes working in full alignment with my spirit and mind. I love the challenges of life that help keep my holy trinity in consistent balance. My superconscious mind is relaxed. My subconscious mind is relaxed. My conscious mind is relaxed. My spirit is relaxed. My mind is relaxed. My body is relaxed. My brain is relaxed. My nervous system is relaxed. My endocrine system is relaxed. My circulation system is relaxed. My skeletal system is relaxed. My immune system is relaxed. The healing intelligence of my spirit, mind, and body is made manifest in every atom of my being. I activate the knowledge of the ancients. Open my Akashic record for all of the multiverse to see in a blinding ray of love and compassion. I activate my power within. I activate my awareness of the crystalline grid's infinite capacity and capabilities. I activate and accept the knowledge accessed. I experience and reflect. I manifest wisdom of the all that I am. I want to be very clear on these affirmations. Thank you, brother.
Dang, I felt some healing just by you reading it. Yeah.
I want to be real clear about these affirmations. Especially since you and I we touched on. Let me go back to it just for a second. You and I we touched on. Oh, you were talking about how open that the vulnerability. When you read this affirmation on a consistent basis, it makes it a whole lot easier to be transparent.
Mm.
It makes it a whole lot easier to be vulnerable, because if you're going to manifest opening your Akashic record for all of the multiverse to see in a blinding ray of love and compassion, number one, you got to love yourself. Number one,
Mm.
you got to have a lot of compassion for yourself, because for the entire multiverse to see this Akashic record in a blinding ray of love and compassion, you would have to become it, and
Mm.
you would have to exude it. It would have to be bleeding out of your pores,
Mm.
right? And these things come in manifestation as a result of us programming ourselves.
Mm.
Neuro linguistic programming could be, we could liken it to that. Obviously, we know that it just is, but we have authors who have given it names, right? So if you'd like to go learn about what I'm talking about, go look up NLP, neuro linguistic programming, on YouTube or Audible or your local library or whatever, and you can learn a little bit more about how to program you. Understand that your mind has a linguistic pattern, which works very well with mathematics, works very well with the golden ratio, works very well with water, right?
Mm.
And in that linguistic pattern of how it works, well, you can utilize that to program yourself. Neuro linguistic programming, NLP. And then once you learn how to do this very well, you will start to notice how your energy will transfer, and other individuals will start to manifest behavior similar to yours because they have accepted you as an alpha.
Mm.
And that's a little bit deeper, right?
Mm.
But the point is, words have power, right? And for us to construct a word, like if Ra and I was to construct a new word, what we would have to do to construct that word is called spelling. We would have to
Mm.
spell that word. We would have to cast a spell,
Mm.
right? You said you wanted that simplicity. Oh, listen, we're in a European construct of life, a Western construct of life. And in the Western construct of life, one of the main things that they think is super important in that Western world is magic, right?
Mm.
So, spelling, how we cast our spells, when we cast our spells, how much repetition in the casting of the spell starts to
Mm.
help to understand the programming of the being.
Look, my brother, if we can definitely get that on the on the website, or get a link to the Google Drive that we'll put somewhere for people now, because that's, man, it really is. And just the importance of you writing it, in the present tense, in the now, because we understand that that is the language of, not just to say the subconscious, that is the language of programming the subconscious. You know, the subconscious is always in the present. You know, go ahead.
I had to jump in for a second. All right. So when we think about programming the subconscious, understand that your pastor has taught you about it. Your sheik has taught you about it. Your counselor at school's probably talked about it. Understand that they have more than likely, almost every one of them have told you to speak things into existence, to speak them as if they already exist. If I want $200,000, I'm not going to my knees and pray, Jesus, I really want 200,000. You know, hopefully one day you make that happen. No, if I'm praying to Jesus, I'm gonna say, hey, Jesus, I really appreciate that 200,000 that I saw in my on the ATM screen when I just took out 20. I wasn't expecting to see the 200,000, but thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Like, it makes me feel so good to have that 200,000 there. Now, what have I done? I spoke it into existence. I spoke it as if it's already been achieved, and I aligned an emotion with it. When I aligned an emotion with it, now what I've done is purposefully created instructions for the subconscious mind to create in the existential reality.
And we just have to just, once again, man, just not beating the dead horse. You know, we have to just understand reality creation. We have to go back and watch the videos when we talk about being a polarized master. So being a polarized master is to be able to see the circular nature of trauma, and then be able to polarize ourselves to a set point and neutralize as well trauma, which it all starts in the mind. You know what I mean? So part of your neutralization of trauma would be, if you know that, you know, you're met with certain triggers the day, maybe the night before. Now you're affirming, because we have to understand at some point we have to blot out the word of the senses. We talked about this in the Kabbalah. You know, it's two different worlds that we're in, and when we're picking up the word from our physical senses, once again, the Kabbalah showed us it's not good to say a fake world, because the things that happen in this world are real, but it's a false world. It's not the world of causality. It's the world of an effect. So if we're having certain trauma triggers, whether it's same people manifesting itself in different bodies, or same probable co-workers, or whatever it is that we have that keeps triggering us, we have to understand at some point we cannot allow us to be reactive. We have to be proactive. What is a proactive approach? The proactive approach is taking, and we talked about this last episode, is taking those certain opportunity windows. And we just talked about how certain trauma, once identified, no longer needs to be tussled with. Once identified, you need to go get that pen and pad, and you need to start scripting you out a new reality for yourself, and use those opportunity windows. And we added one more, which is not just the morning and the night, but taking a time during the day to consciously sit yourself to write these affirmations, to regurgitate these speaking points, because we understand that it's a crystallization from the above that has, not vice versa. It's not vice versa. So I would feel like we talked about before, and I think we might have to do an episode on that, when to use lower magic and when to go higher magic. But a lot of times we're trying to use, because trauma is so triggering, you immediately try to deal with whatever's triggering you in the moment, which is lower magic. And it's not properly allowing you to reorganize it in a way that is going to be beneficial. So certain things we have to remember, being a polarized master, remember that. And not even, once again, it's to, when it comes to certain triggers, it might seem like we're living a certain day, but when you're stuck in a certain conundrum, you're really not. You're living the same day over and over and over again. So for me to say to wait until you're triggered to use this, that'd be irresponsible. Since we understand the secular and the recursive nature of pain and trauma, that it keeps coming over and over again till you deal with it, you need to be getting on top of it the day before. You know what I'm saying? 2 days before, a week before, already anticipating and already putting yourself in a polarized position to not be hit with that pendulum, which is the trauma. So this is why knowing thyself and taking inventory of your shadow self, of whatever is triggering you, especially if you're being triggered by consistent things, this is letting you know what is being crystallized, what is the natural subconscious program that you have. And then once again, as soon as you're able to see what it is, you're able to just use the law of polarity to just affirm the opposite. You don't even really have to know what you want. You just know that I'm just going to use words that are opposite from what I've been experiencing. So if you've been experiencing loss of love, ill of health, poverty, like the thing that Ferdinand said, now you're just writing and affirming the opposite. You know what I mean? And it might seem like this is simple, but it only seems like it's simple to the people who haven't been following along with us and haven't fully accepted that all is mind, and anything that comes into the physical of the physical world has first started in the mind, the imagination, and then it crystallized itself into its physical counterpart.
Bro, you hitting on some stuff right now, man. You hitting on some real stuff. You know, what Brother Raw is bringing to the table. Everybody out there, please take notes. Please put this to work, because you can solve all of your problems by just changing your mind.
And that's not an understatement. I know he said it once again. Ferdinand about to be the master of simplicity as well. You know what I mean? Because he's saying things, and but it's literal. You could change everything just by changing your mind. Go ahead.
In the Moorish Science Temple of America, you often hear thought is the cause of it all, right? So if we raise our thinking to infinite wisdom, well, what kind of effects do we see? I hope everybody out there was listening to that question. Ask yourself that question, right? Ask yourself alone. Ask your partner. Ask your wife. Ask your husband. Ask your family members or your friends around you. Ask them that question. So we're in episode 27, Shadow Work. And Two Brothers and Idea, Ferdinand and Raw, we're here with you. And I got another treat for y'all, the post-traumatic stress disorder and related diseases in combat veterans. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over to chapter 15 in this book and take a look. Trauma and pain, linking emotional and physical symptoms. Chronic pain is a common complaint in the retired military setting, with Veterans Administration patients rating significantly worse pain than those in the general public. The higher incidence of pain may be due to the heightened exposure to trauma and psychological stress. The combination of pain and post-traumatic stress disorder creates greater self-reported pain and affective distress when compared to pain in patients without PTSD symptoms. Indeed, childhood abuse has been associated with greater chronic pain in adulthood, with emotional neglect predicting lifetime trauma exposure over and above physical or sexual abuse. Abuse is also positively correlated with anxiety, depression, somatic symptoms, and PTSD. Childhood emotional neglect may also predict later emergence of an inability to identify or express emotions, and somatization, with alexithymia a known risk factor for psychiatric and psychosomatic disorders. Theories addressing the relationship of PTSD and pain have been proposed but not well researched. The mutual maintenance model highlights various factors that may occur, including attentional biases with patients attending more to threatening or painful stimuli, pain as a reminder of the trauma events, and avoidance to minimize pain and disturbing thoughts. The triple vulnerability model for PTSD can also be applied to chronic pain. It asserts that life events and one's emotional reactions to the events are perceived as unpredictable and uncontrollable, leading to impairment. Additionally, development and attachment theories describe the effects of abuse and neglect on self-efficacy and trust.
Man, that's just like, man, it's almost like the body, the body goes through certain things, and the body forgets quicker than the mind does. It's like the body ends up healing. You might not even see no trace of the wound, but somehow the mind is then creating disease and function. Even the way you're reading something like that doesn't even seem like an esoteric book, but somehow it's also correlating trauma, and where most of our trauma is picked up at is childhood trauma. You know what I mean?
Right.
Before we had the defenses, and also before the ego was healthily developed. You know, the ego is good at blocking stuff out and separating self. When we're in that hypnagogic state of internalization, and we're getting impressed and imprinted by trauma, good things and bad things. So this is the reason why that childhood state is more. But ironically, because it's like the first 7 years, we're almost in a meditative state. We're almost in the as above, and we're less. You know, we're still fresh from the ether. So we're still connected to the ether, which means that we're more impressionable. It's easier for us to take things from, you know, the ethereal body, manifest them to the internal body. But it's just, once again, more evidence that is just showing that, you know, even though it might feel like what you went through was an external physical event, it's really an internal battle of the mind that is allowing it to progress, and that is allowing it to have a continuation and reimbursement, a reimbursement of that same energy over and over and over again.
Yeah, you know, let me touch on why working on this shadow work is so important. I just recently touched in this podcast today on how the subconscious mind receives instructions. Okay, this is very, very important, very simplistic, but very important. When we don't do the shadow work properly, and let's say that our homie, one of the friends, a family member, maybe a television show, some kind of a social media, a trigger gets pulled, pushed, whatever we want to call it on the triggers. Trigger gets hit. Well, if we emotionalize whatever just happened, that thought is got to come into physical manifestation. And that thought is going to be tied to fear, guilt, doubt, or disbelief, or a combination of the four. So now what we have created is some type of a talisman that is locked into negative energy. And we have surrounded ourselves with it without whether we know it or not. Right? This is very, very, very important for everyone out there to understand that as you walk in your life every day, make sure you putting in that work, putting in that shadow work. Because if you don't put in that shadow work, much of what you create in your existential existence, what you see with your eyeballs every day, you're not even going to realize why it's so out of control. You're going to be thinking, man, you know, the devil just don't like me. The devil be on me all the time. And you're not realizing that all you seeing in your existential reality is exactly what's going on within.
Nah, man, that was perfect. And just to even, you know, I was doing shadow work before I even knew it had a name. And it's funny because that's the name that the Akashics gave to me. Then I like found out later that it actually was a name. And it's typically was coined by Carl Jung. So I just want to, I was trying to bring it up, but I don't have to share it. I could just read it. But just read what my AI said about Carl Jung. But it said the shadow self definition. The shadow is an archetype representing the repressed, denied, or underdeveloped aspects of the personality. It includes traits deemed unacceptable by the conscious ego or societal norms, such as aggression, selfishness, or even latent talents. Nature is not inherently evil. The shadow contains both negative traits and positive traits that the ego has rejected. Personal versus collective shadow. The personal shadow arises from individual experience and repression. The collective shadow encompasses societal level disowned traits like cultural prejudice or systematic injustices. So just to add to it, and it has one more, but you know, Carl Jung also believed that we have our own personal shadow, but then we have the uncollective shadow of the actual people. Let's say, like for an example, there's there's a shadow self of the dominant society for their own repressed guilt that what they've done to us as, you know, melanated people, just to give you an example. And it has shadow work. The purpose of shadow work is to confront and integrate the shadow, fostering individuation. Jung's concept of self-realization through unifying conscious and unconscious elements. So Carl Jung believed that through shadow work, we can have a more fuller self-realization of self, because we're integrating these repressed things that, and a lot of times too, just, for an example, a lot of times the things that people hate in others because they're low-key practicing it, or they're low-key, it's just like an unconscious thing that's like, why are you so excited? Like, you could have just said, but you're too, yeah. So, these are things to where, a lot of times we are rejecting things that actually represent us. So just to finish reading it real quick, it says process, awareness, recognizing shadow material through introspection, emotional triggers, or projection on others. Criticizing others for traits one denies in himself. I see that happening a lot, and I try my best to do inventory, because I've seen a lot of times someone is being really critical of someone. I'm like, yo, that's you. How are you pointing that out in them when that is the thing that you do? So that, once again, that's another. If you find yourself doing that, criticizing people, just sit and ask yourself, are these things that I'm actually displaying in shadow self, and my ego is repressing them? This is why I'm so quick to judgment it. And just to finish it up real quick, almost done. It says integration, accepting these aspects without identification. That's the personal part. That's another part, is to accept it without self-identifying, but just accepting it as an aspect of your shadow self. It reduces internal conflict, and it also reduces projection. So basically just saying that someone once say, well, I don't ever see how someone can do that. That's a little extreme, because if you have a level of empathy, you almost can, you're not saying you have to identify it, but you almost can rectify almost any situation why someone would do it if you would put themselves in that in the shoes. So it's almost being able to have empathy, not saying that you agree, because you don't have to self-identify it. It allows you to deal with your triggers with less conflict around it. So another method that he has here is for dream analysis. And shout out to Ferdinand, he always talks about everything is symbology. But Carl Jung thought that all of our dreams is symbology, mostly of the unconscious self. That's why you can't make sense of it, because there's something that's happening on a lower level that you're unaware of, that your dreams are trying to blare it to you. But since we don't see dreams as symbols, we're not properly interpreting. I'm gonna finish it up here. So it says we have to do dream analysis, which is interpreting symbols in dreams to uncover unconscious content. We have to use active imagination, which is dialoguing with shadow figures through visualization or art. Some people use music, to get out. DMX is a perfect example. Dark Man X, with him in front of us dealing with shadow self. Therapy, exploring repressed emotions in a safe state. We talked about this too. Journaling is a great way to kind of see what's going on in the unconscious mind. Sometimes not even having a thought of reason, just let the pen go and see where the pen takes you. I do that a lot too.
Yeah.
And it talked about here the importance of integration. Individuation, which Carl Jung calls individuation, the process of integrating your shadow, not fighting it, not repressing it, but getting it, it's creating, as Ferdinand said earlier, a wholer self. I'll just read this and we're done with this. But it says integrating the shadow is vital for becoming balanced, authentic individual. It presents one-sidedness, which is over-identifying with one side of your persona, or it calls it here a social mask. Then it has psychological health. Acknowledging shadow may manifest as unacknowledged shadows, manifest itself as projections, self-sabotage, mental health issues. And it also reduces, any effect of having, integration. When you have just trauma that you're doing, but it's unrecognized within self, but yet you can see it in everyone else. You know what I mean? So these are also things when it comes to doing with shadow, to us really getting. And then I'll just leave us with this part. One of the key things when you really get intimate with your shadow is what do I condemn in others, and what am I criticizing of others? You know what I mean? Will really help you get in tune with where you are with your shadow.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that that's a growth area for me, right? And I'm okay with it, because like at the end
Of
of the day,
course.
I don't mind being butt naked in front of everybody, right?
Right.
I'm completely cool with vulnerability and transparency, because there's never a point where you stop growing, or unless you're about to be 6 feet in the dirt. Other than that, we all got work to do. Right. So there's some work that Ferdinand got to do. And I appreciate my brother bringing up Carl Jung, because this is one of the dudes that I've had to study for my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Right. So, and he's a very, very important figure within the realms of counseling. But today I'm trying to make sure we don't make it to 3 hours.
Oh yeah. Well, let me just add this too, man.
Well, I want to
If
give
you
you the
got
floor so you can give
okay.
your closing remarks. So you got the floor, my brother.
Well, just to once again, and if you guys have been rocking with us, you'll see different aspects of me and Ferdinand. Cause I see it in me and I see it in him, even when I watch back certain clips. So you'll see peak moments where we're super confident, we're super cocky, we seem flawless, we seem perfect, and then in the same conversation, you'll hear Ferdinand. This is once again, I told Ferdinand one of the reasons why, not one, but one of the many reasons why I rock with him is his vulnerability, right? If your teacher or leader or someone that you're consuming information from does not show you vulnerability, does not at some point admit what they struggle with, please find a new teacher, because guess what? This work is never done. It's never done. Even when you hit 6 feet under, like Ferdinand said, you're growing. You're growing in reverse. You're growing opposite. So, to use my last, and Bible says, one of the greatest things you can do is to give your life for your brother. You know what I mean? So to use my last minutes of my floor is to give shout out to my brother, because it just further just allowed me to say the reason why I love building with him, because I understand to really be a teacher and to really be in a leadership position, it takes you being vulnerable, because you cannot create a separation between the people that you're trying to lead. Most people try to do that. They try to create a separation by perfecting their steps, so because they think if they show vulnerability that people won't follow. And I argue that is reverse. When you show people that I'm not above you, I'm here with you, locking arms with you, and I'm struggling. He struggled at times. We struggle at times. That's the beauty of taking this journey together. And yeah, I just want to stay with that. If you don't have a person or people in your life that you're listening to, and at some point they show you the chink in their armor, I would say be very careful and be very wary, because it might be in a position to where they're only giving you certain type of information so they can stand on your shoulders and make themselves feel tall. When it comes to true people who are trying to help and who are trying to push the needle forward, it requires a high level level of empathy. And shout out to you, my brother Ferdinand, because we had a conversation before and I was kind of just expressing and emoting, who I am. And most people, the stuff slips right by them what I'm saying. And you were somehow able to pick up, on what I was saying. And when you said that word, I think you remember surrender or submission. I was like, God, yes, I'm over here using all these words. And me, abstract, trying to figure out all these words. And my brother of simplicity just came with one word, which made me feel like, yo, he hears me. I feel understood. And I think that's what most of us is trying to be. We're trying to some way get around people who understands us, who's not talking at us. Well, you need to be doing this and you ain't on this. You need to be pure. That can come down to your level and meet you where you are and say, you know what? I've conquered these things, but I do struggle with these things. And once again, I'll just shout that out for you and myself. That's the reason, one of the reasons why I do love myself, is to give myself a shout out, that I'm not afraid to tell people that I'm human, that I'm not afraid to tell people that even as much smarts that I have or people think of me, I still too have to get up on my days and say my affirmations, say my gratitude, go through my routine. Because if I don't, it doesn't matter what me and Ferdinand talked about last week. It doesn't matter what I so-called prayed to God to. It doesn't matter. I have to eat my daily bread every single day like you. So don't think that you're broken. Don't think that it's something wrong if you've been on this journey, and sometimes you have good days, sometimes you have bad days. This is the reason why we're having this conversation, to say you're going to have those days. But we can be the polarized master. We can be the shadow master. Hopefully, we guys are giving you tools that we're using in our real life, in our actual lives, that's helping us. Because it told you we can't completely escape the pendulum. So guess what? Ferdinand might have been right Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? Rob might have been right Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We was skipping and jumping and silver surfing past the pendulum. But guess what? We got caught, which is natural. Because even when you get caught, there's no such thing as really taking the L. If Ferdinand could speak to the same thing, once you do so-called catch that L, it's also a learning lesson. It's something in that is either teaching you or maybe someone who's around you needed to learn. So you had to go through it so that you can be able to say, hey, man, I've been in the mud too. Matter of fact, I've been in the mud with you. Let me help you up, my brother. So once again, I just wanted to use my last, moment to acknowledge that vulnerability, because vulnerability and authenticity is to me the thing that leads to true transformation. And if you're following people that cannot be vulnerable, they just seem like they're Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, they're always hitting it out the park, I would just caution just to be a little bit wary, because to me, they're creating a false persona of perfection that does not exist in this realm.
You know, my brother, I really appreciate you letting me stand on your shoulders. But nah, on real talk, real talk. Really appreciate the wisdom from Ra. This brother comes with the fire every time. Then he, if it's too much ablaze, then he pour a little water on it, right? Listen, this brother right here is bringing some powerful, powerful messages, some powerful, powerful energy. Use these energies, use these lessons as an example. Use them to elevate whatever it is you're attempting to do. Understand that we're giving you a holistic view of whatever we're talking about so that you're not walking away with an illusion. Often there are many speakers out here who they'll give you some fly information. It will be so fly, but they gave you one piece of the pie. So now what happens is you got to come back for the rest, or you got to get in them books heavy to find the other pieces. And you might not even know that they only gave you one piece. Listen, we come to the table giving you the whole pie. What you do with the pie is up to you. You might decide, what, I'm going to go home and go ahead and start, get my spoon. Let me get some of this pie, right? And then other people might decide, I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. I'll come touch it sometime. And then 8 weeks later, it's still there. It's growing mold now. That's on you. But take these lessons and utilize them. This is everlasting life more abundantly lessons. Make no mistake about it. You are getting these lessons direct from the source. I'll go as far to say that I do believe that my brother is over here channeling. And I'm confirming that I'm over here channeling. We're pulling these messages direct out the ether, direct out the Akashic records. We're pulling these messages direct out of the superconscious mind. Understand that you are receiving wealth when you come to this podcast. Understand that you are getting all the tools that you need. Those tools are the workshop of the mind. So take your time with yourself. Listen to yourself. Put yourself out in nature. Eat some holistic food. Get some sunlight. Drink some water. Turn off the TVs. Turn off the screens. Get away from the 90-degree angles and the rectangles and the squares and the smell of paint and all these things. Get away from those things for just a little bit and allow yourself to be home again. On our next episode, we're going to be cooking again. Y'all be blessed and expose your gift.